Hello, Hex Scholars, and welcome to episode 50 of Two Turns Ahead. Nicholas Pedrasky and I, Michael Allen, are here with the infamous Cory Jones. We have two announcements, and then we're just going to jump straight to talking to Cory. So, our first announcement, Penta, you want to mention?
Yep, real quick, on March 14th and succeeding on the 15th, 5shards.com, and more specifically, myself and Michael will be hosting the Sapphire Cup, presented by our own community's Hex Colin, who you probably all know at this point, but in case you don't, he's an incredibly generous community member. And the day we're recording this is his birthday, so even though I've said it to you several times at this point, Colin, happy birthday. This is the fourth cup in the series and is a free-to-enter community tournament at this point with well over $1,000 in prizes, as well as the first actual cash prize in the community tournament. First place, in addition to the in-game prizes, will be rewarded $250, second will be awarded $150, and third and fourth will receive $50 apiece. Again, thank you, Colin. Make sure you head over to the 5 Shards website and check out the information there.
Excellent. Our second announcement is a project that has been an ongoing project for Two Turns Ahead as well as 5shards.com. Elysian, our fantastic sound engineer who has worked on more episodes than either Penta or I have been on, is releasing his newest Sound of Shards release that includes sounds for every single card in set 1. We will link to the new project when it's ready to go. In addition to that, when we update the files on 5shards.com and make a new post about it, Mark will be giving away the following to people who leave constructive criticism about the sounds he's made. First, a full set of commons for set 1, a full set of commons for set 2, a Master Moss, a Killipede, a Vampire King, and an Angel of Dawn. These are updates and cleaner versions of the sound files for Hex that you can install just to make a more immersive experience with the client itself. So, with that, Cory, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you. No problem at all. My pleasure.
The first question we have is, well, just basic. We know that you just got back from GDC and want to know how did it go. Are there any highlights you want to share with us? Anything related to Hex?
Actually, I didn't go.
That's hilarious because every single source that we checked in on said you did. So we were so sure you had.
I was going to be on a Monday morning, super early. I was going to be on a panel about Kickstarter, where they wanted me to give, the top 2 things to do and the top 2 things not to do in a Kickstarter. And so I was flying out late on Sunday night trying to maximize my time, and I actually got bumped off my flight. And so, unfortunately, the only way I could get up there in time would be to just drive through the night, and that wasn't really up for that. So I ended up just canceling the whole trip because I had a bunch of meetings. But that panel was really the reason that I was going up, and so I felt like it was an omen that I should stay and continue to work and get ready for our big launch next week. Or if you're listening to this, our big launch that happened today.
Yeah, possibly very soon. Since this will be out in the morning, and I don't know if you guys will be patching at midnight, although you totally should. So I suppose with that. That actually does bring up an interesting point that Unity has recently been updated to, or recently released version 5. Is there anything in the new engine that excites you about Hex, and should we expect a new version update at some point in the near future, or is that something that really hasn't come across the team's mind yet?
No. So we have quite a number of Unity experts here. I mean, that is the engine for Hex, and we've done. I mean, there are. A couple of million lines of code at this point, and what we've done with Unity, I think, is pretty remarkable. But the last upgrade to the version of Unity right before this one gave us dynamic fonts. It did a whole bunch of stuff that was great and just critical. This one is not as critical. There are some things that would potentially be helpful for our mobile development. But we are in the process of looking at whether or not it's, there's a lot of issues with GUI. So they've had a back and forth relationship with the guy who made GUI. And so we're not sure how all of that sort of ended up falling out in terms of the new version of Unity. And so we're still investigating. But at this point, I don't think it's something that we're going to spend. It's pretty difficult every time we have to upgrade. I don't think we're going to be upgrading at this point. I think we're going to be sticking with what we have. I don't think we have any huge problems. If we determine that there's enough value in terms of some of the mobile stuff, then we might. But right now, one of the things that is most important is that, and as I've said many times, we have a finite amount of bandwidth, and everything that we spend bandwidth on means something else isn't getting attention. And so we just have to be really careful and pick and choose everything we do, because everything right now is basically a giant priority list. And so what goes above what is something that is always on our mind and something we talk about every single day. And so if you look at even little features in the game or bugs or whatever, the understanding that you should have is that we know about them and we want them too, but it's always a matter of, okay, well, if we put that above this, that means that doesn't come in and this does. And so we're always just sort of conjiggering exactly what that priority list is to try and give the player the best experience possible.
Now, I seem to recall, or not recall, I thought part of the reason why the first upgrade was both critical and also took a lot of resources is because you were transitioning from a code base that was the pre-Kickstarter team's code base to more stuff that you've done in-house as opposed to the people who worked on it previously.
Correct.
And am I correct in imagining that if you were to upgrade, it would be a lot less painful than it was previously?
Yeah, that is correct. Both of those statements are correct. At this point, 100% of the code in the game has been done by the internal team. So we've redone absolutely everything that was in the game. And also the upgrading to the newer version of Unity, this new one, would be much easier. I mean, that took us, I think it was all said and done between 4 to 5 months of work for several of the key people on the project. So it was a huge one, but we literally had to do it. So this one is a little more optional, it feels like, and if we determine we have to, then we'll set aside the resources to get it done. But right now, it doesn't look like it. But yes, your first statement was correct. We did have to go back in and tear out a lot of systems and rebuild them from scratch, so they would work with that version of Unity. And also there were just some issues. And so, for instance, the tournament, that was the last one. That was the last piece that we had to redo from scratch ourselves. And so the tournaments are now completely redone from the internal team. And as you've seen lately, the large scale tournament, we're getting close. We're getting real close.
Yeah, that was really exciting.
When we get past that next hurdle, the goal is infinite scalability. So the way our system is built, we should be able to run a tournament with thousands of people in it. So my hope is that someday we could run the largest single fire esports event ever. I mean, I don't know what the record is now. I haven't looked, but if we can run a esports TCG tournament and we get 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people in it at one time, I think that probably has a chance of being the biggest out there.
I actually now want to Google what's the biggest one at the moment because I'm curious by that. But as we're doing that, so this is kind of trivial, but it was something that, Colin suggested that we asked you. Last week we were talking quite a bit about buying Girl Scout cookies. I got sold. Penta had Girl Scout cookies invading, or Girl Scouts invading his home trying to get him to buy cookies. And Colin suggested that you were an expert in the topic of selling cookies and that we should ask you about that.
I'm not the expert. My daughter is. So my daughter, Holiday, she when it comes to sales, I mean, she is, my wife calls her my clone. She is just like me. It's borderline creepy how much the kid is like me. Super close. And she has this gift. She's a little, she's very, very personable, very high EQ, read people real well. And she's really good at sales, oddly, which as a kid I was too. And so she came up, and this was not me, I swear. She came up with this whole pattern where, and she really wanted to go sell things door to door. She just insisted that I walk around with her. She went door to door to sell Girl Scout cookies, which is my wife's idea of hell, but I love because I did it as a kid too. I was drama club president. I was in lots of clubs, and as a kid, I would love to go around and sell things door to door, and oddly, she loves it too. So she came up with this pattern. And it was that she would knock on the door and she would tell people, hi, I'm Holiday. I'm with, Girl Scout Troop 731. I am a psychic Girl Scout and I'm working on my mind reading merit badge. Can you please imagine your favorite cookie? And I'm going to try and read your mind. And then by this point, they're already laughing. And then she would tell them, okay, I see Thin Mints. And they'd be busting up, like, oh no, I love, the caramel ones. And she goes, oh, I actually happen to have Girl Scout cookies with me, and I am selling them as well. And and again, I didn't come up with this at all. It was all her. And I told her, I go, Holiday, like, you realize how sophisticated this is, right? You're asking them to think about what their favorite cookie is. So now they're imagining it, maybe imagining eating it, maybe making them want a cookie. And she's like, yeah, Dad, I know. That's exactly what I was going for. I want them to imagine eating a cookie, and they'll want to buy cookies. And so every door we went to, they would go scrounge for change to get $5 together to buy a box of cookies, because they just were just laughing so hard at this whole bit that she had come up with. It was really fun. I was so proud. I was nearly in tears. Like, I remember doing it as a kid myself, walking around selling stuff door to door, and seeing her do it and taking my advice. I told her, like, after you sell it, you kind of run away and yell thank you. Take the time to look them in the eye and say thank you so much, and be very genuine about it, because they bought cookies from you. And she's like, I'll do it. And then she would look at them in the eye and say thank you, and they had a big reaction. And so she saw that sort of response, and it really meant something. I mean, I was so proud. We were going to do a thing too. I told her, listen, if you get somebody grumpy at the door, tell them, listen, I'm not here to sell Girl Scout cookies, and then tell them you're the mind reading psychic Girl Scout, and you just want to get your merit badge, and see if that gets them laughing, and if you could turn it into a sale. And but unfortunately, every door where they answered the door, she bought cookies, so she didn't have anyone that she could try that trick on. So she was kind of disappointed in that, but it was. I'm sorry for the long story, but it was great. I loved it, and it was so fun to go around and see her doing something that I loved so much as a kid, and to see her loving it too. It's a weird thing to be in love with, walking around door to door selling things, but it's a blast if that's what you do.
That's crazy. That's actually, don't be sorry for the long story, because that's actually, we were warned that it might be a long story, and we have all the time in the world. So that's
there you go. There it is.
So when she is older and she is running her Kickstarter for the TCG to take down Hex,
yeah, right,
you're gonna have to be very careful.
Yeah. She's I think right now she wants to be a comedy writer. We take her up, and she takes summer classes up at the Second City up in LA. So she's very into, like, we listen to stand-up comedy together a lot of inappropriate stuff, but she's super funny, and so she's really into comedy.
Who's her favorite?
She loves Patton Oswalt. We listen to Patton Oswalt quite a bit.
That's good.
I have to. I edited a little bit. I mean, she gets exposed to risque stuff, but I do edit it a little bit, so it's not the really crazy. She loves John Mulaney, Mike Capps, we've been listening to, but there's a bunch. I mean, she's super into comedy. It's pretty funny.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
A little more back onto the topic of Hex, or at least your position in Hex. There's a common idea that as a producer of content, you should avoid the comment section. But you seem to read quite a bit on the forums and in other places, which actually brings up a question. Last time you were on Cyrus's stream, you mentioned reading the forums a lot, but a couple of people wanted to know how engaged you are in consuming community content in other places, or just community content in general, and how do you deal with the non-constructive criticism?
A lot. I mean, I listen to podcasts, I read the forums, I read Reddit, which is probably a mistake, but no, it's Reddit's actually even it seems like most of the feedback that we get is constructive and positive, and the people who are negative are almost like cartoony versions of trolling negative people. I mean, I just know you can go if you go to Reddit right now and you look at the I
admin Reddit, by the way, so I'm well aware.
Okay, so if you look at that first one, Arena opens, and you look at the comments, the first two, Mock and Thrawn, frickin' frack of negativity, of course, with their, the negative comments. It's like, yeah, okay, I get it. Geez Louise. There's nothing, the notion that everyone here isn't fixated on doing whatever is best for this game and for the people that play it. I mean, it's just lunacy. There's what possible motive could anyone here have to do anything that isn't in the best interest of this game or the people playing it? I am endlessly grateful because of the Kickstarter. This game has been my lifelong dream. It's actually coming to pass. And so, I mean, it's just, and I love the community, and I love reading all the feedback, because, the creative. I don't know. I mean, I've said it in the past, but I think the kind of community we seem to have aggregated because of the Kickstarter and because of the type of project seems to be slightly more mature, slightly more creative, and slightly more positive. And so what you end up with is this really nice ability to look into our community and get amazing feedback and amazing ideas. I mean, there have been tons of stuff on the forums that are things that are in our game now that came from the community. I mean, absolutely. And so I see people say like X, Y, or Z. People here actually talk about it, actually think about it, and often are like, yeah, that's a great idea, let's do it. So, I mean, that has been remarkable. And you get that, like, we're a weird beast because we're not really an indie. We're not a big company at all. We're this weird middle place where it's like a bunch of super passionate people in control of making a game. But the game that we're making is, I mean, people don't know, but how much this game's going to end up costing at the end. This game is huge. This would be considered a large project, even at a large publisher. But yet it's being run like an indie with just a bunch of people who love it, trying to do the best they can. And so it's a very odd mix of things. And I've been in the games industry my whole life. I'm up to like 23 years now in video games. I've never seen anything like it. And so it's kind of special that way. And that's why I feel like, being part of the community, being engaged and reading the forums and talking to people directly is a really important part of sort of this experiment.
The Kickstarter community is a little bit weird, not just for Hex. Your Ghostbuster Kickstarter is about to be completed soon, right?
We have about 5 days.
5 days. And I follow Cryptozoic on Facebook. I saw the post on there. I was like, I'm going to click the comments because I'm curious what people are saying. It's Ghostbusters. And a lot of the first comments are like, Cryptozoic is a big company. Why are they using Kickstarter? Like, it's only for hipster, new company type things. And so you get seemingly a weird mix of individuals of what they expect Kickstarter should be.
I'll say this about that. One thing, you notice that look at how many comments there are in the Ghostbusters Kickstarter. There's like 22,000 comments.
24,000 actually right now.
What's that?
24,000 actually.
24,000. I guess I checked like an hour.
An hour ago, yeah.
For Hex only had like 20,000, and it raised $2.5 million and had a very vocal community. It's unbelievable. Ghostbusters. It's not only a game Kickstarter, it's also like a community. Like they have they just sit there and chat with each other all day long. It's the craziest thing. It's so cool. And Ghostbusters is like, I love Ghostbusters. I'm very passionate about it. And that community sort of aggregated together on that message system and have sort of become this self-reinforcing little community. It's pretty cool. The thing that people should realize about Kickstarter is it's a very unique vehicle for a certain type of product. For miniatures games, the way that they work is because they're very, very expensive to make, you have to offer very high prices and very little for what you spend because all of the tooling and everything, and you don't know how much you actually can produce and sell. And so everything that you produce and don't sell becomes, a big part of what makes miniatures games have losses. And so Kickstarter offered the ability to amortize or to aggregate all of that cost of manufacturing against a known group of people that are purchasing the product. So once you're making, thousands and thousands of the miniatures, their cost individually goes down and down and down, and you're able to take that extra savings and roll it back into giving people more stuff. And so it becomes this very interesting vehicle where by offering the miniatures through a Kickstarter, how many are going to be made, and you can make the offer much more compelling. And so Kickstarter and miniatures games sort of became this very odd match made in heaven in terms of how to make that kind of product.
This is your first miniatures heavy board game, right?
Yeah, it is. We've been talking about it for a long time. We saw the success of the miniatures Kickstarters. We love Kickstarter as a platform. We saved that other Kickstarter. I'm a big believer in Kickstarter. I think it's everyone talked about Kickstarter's over. Kickstarter's a flash in the pan. I don't believe it. I think Kickstarter will be around for a very long time. I think it's a very important thing to exist. And so we had wanted to do a miniatures Kickstarter because it was right up our alley, something we had wanted to do before Kickstarter even was a miniatures heavy style game. And then we had the Ghostbusters license and felt like, wow, this is the perfect fit. And then they, luckily, our contacts at Sony were very receptive to it. And I don't think they really knew what Kickstarter was, but they were open to it. And now they're super excited. They saw the success and they love it. They love that the community got so excited, and we're the heroes basically over there, in terms of the Ghostbusters products. So we couldn't be more happy.
That's crazy.
Awesome. That's going well for you. So, a little bit about development questions. I'm going to lead off with a relatively annoying question because I'm asking you this before Arena is officially launched, and I'm asking you for more. So, can you give us a general roadmap of the next goals for Hex after Arena? I'm not asking you for particular dates because we know how those go, but more just like what are the target things Hex what should be coming out next afterwards? Are we looking at like set 3? Are we looking at tournaments, dungeons?
Yes. The next big, again, this is where everyone gets mad at me, but it's okay. This is a good part of being the boss. You can't get too mad at me. The next big thing you're going to see is, and the way that the patches typically work is we have a bunch of stuff going on simultaneously, because the way that we work here is we have different groups of engineers and artists that are working on different things. And so the whole group doesn't sort of like steer into one particular feature. It's broken up into a bunch of different, like the people who are working on getting the large scale tournament stuff are not the same people who are working on the arena, as an example, and they were not the same people who are working on the new chat. So these are different groups. Mm-hmm. The next big thing will be set 3. With set 3, some of the other stuff that, and again, they just like I said before, we're always reconfiguring exactly what we can hit. I know that with set 3, the plan right now is also that chests and chest opening will be part of that. What else? Boy, I don't want to say because I know that stuff just changed over the last day or two.
The last official announcement today was that they would discuss what happens with chess and chess opening on Tuesday, but since it's coming out on Tuesday, we'll find out about that then.
You will. Well. You'll find out that it's not quite yet. And this, again, like as I've said before, everything has a cost. Everything, no matter how big or how small, has a cost. And so we're always sort of just bundling up exactly what we can to get to the players. And then again, as I said, the costs are spread out across multiple groups. So one group may have had something that was incredibly critical to getting Arena out, and we're unable to finish the chest opening experience. And the choice was, do we wait and push Arena so those people could finish what was necessary to then get the chests in, or do we get Arena out and then follow up with the chests? And I just feel like the sort of the tone of what we've done to date has been that we're going to get you what we can as quickly as possible and then add to it, rather than hold, here it is, polished and perfect. And I feel like that's sort of in line with this whole notion of, we've invited out the Kickstarter people into the alpha, and we got, we let you see behind the curtain totally. And so it just felt like this was the way to continue to run it.
That makes sense, yeah. I actually just spent like a minute or two there blanking out and being really excited that set 3 is coming out because it's like the thing I'm most excited about. I'm super excited about Arena, but now that we know it's coming out, I'm like, oh, hey. And I know I feel bad saying it because we're getting one huge chunk of content and like I don't want to take away from that being amazing, because like I rescheduled employees so that I could have that day specifically to just set aside and farm some Arena. But as a competitive player, and I'm sure Mike feels the same way, as obviously we have said on the podcast several times, we both have a more competitive mindset than a PvE mindset. Set 3 is really exciting, so I kind of just blanked out there for a second.
Set 3 is amazing. It's great. I'm very excited.
I assure you the rest of us are too.
We also go back to the 3. We'll go to 3-3-3 for draft, and there's something about the all one set draft format that I actually kind of like. You can really double down on one theory or get some really wacky draft decks when you have all of one set. So that'll be pretty fun.
Related to that, so we had a bunch of set 3 questions that were going to come a little bit later, so I'm moving things around. And this is probably way too early to say, but do you know when set 3 comes out and you have 3-3-3 draft, will you have 2-2-2 or 2-2-1 queues still available, or does that depend on the population?
It really depends on the population. So it's easy enough for us to put in multiple formats. As you've seen, I mean, we've done it. It's trivial, but the issue becomes typically is that they just don't fire off, or they draw away people. And typically what we've seen at this point, so it's not that big a deal, because right now you'll look at competitive draft queue and it'll be like, oh, there's 3 there and there's 3 in the draft queue. Like right now I'm looking at it right this second. It's 2 and 8 and 2 and 8 on those 2. So eventually you'll see one of those hit like 4 or 5, and then you'll see the other one all just go to the other one. So competitive, for instance, will get to like 4 or 5 people, and then the 3 that are in just straight draft queue will all leave and join the competitive because they want to play right now. So it sort of self-corrects a little bit. I would like to have a queue to use the set 1 and set 2 packs for sure, but I don't think we have a final decision on that. This would be specifically something that Alex Charsky would manage. So, and I'm a big believer. I have a tendency to be very controlling and a little bit overbearing, but I've really, for the Hex team, I've really tried to allow the people that I've empowered to make these decisions really come up with a well thought out plan, and then that's what we do. So I'll see what Alex puts together, and I'm sure he has something in mind already, and that's what we'll do.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes me really self-conscious of the time. Like, there was a long time ago where you mentioned, and obviously that this was very early on in the project, that triple set 1 would be available alongside 222 or 221, and I just remember bringing it up on the podcast. This must have been on one of the first episodes I was on. It just kind of comes full circle, where I mentioned I realized why you guys did it, but I was sad that both of those draft queues didn't exist simultaneously, because having different draft environments is something that was personally important to me. Although I imagine there's also issues a little less discussed here about being able to expend your set 2 and 1 packs as well as your set 3 packs when those draft queues fire, because having a surplus of those packs is kind of an issue. This isn't actually something we had written down, but it does come up on the block later on down the road. Like, this is probably more than a year from now, obviously, when the game is doing well and is the amazing hit that you expect it to be, and that we all really, really want it to be. Do you think there will be queues that turn back the clock? Like, will we see 221 coming back even after set 5 has come out, kind of thing, just kind of like a special draft for the week or the month? As long as the sets haven't rotated out, then yeah, absolutely. Once they rotate out, then I don't want them appearing ever again. Ever again?
No. So I am taking, although this is a digital game, I am taking the idea of scarcity and secondary value and everything else that is so important to a TCG, and I'm making that a priority for us. And so I want to be very, very careful about that. That said, if the sets haven't rotated out, then doing special weekend-long draft queues where you can play with the older content is great. One of the things you mentioned, though, is that when we go to all set 3 draft, having the ability to allow people, because even now, if you have set 1 and set 2, you're still using both sets. Even though you're using 2 of set 2 and 1 of set 1, you're still using them. If we go to all set 3, I think there's a very good chance, and again, I think Alex is on the same page with me on this as well. There's a very good chance that we'll continue to run a 2-2-1 queue. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we did is really keep in mind how much product is out there, especially when it comes to sort of the set 1 and set 2 stuff that we had a lot of Kickstarter rewards tied to. But also, it's really partially a function of how big our community is, too. So right now, you're seeing the queues typically fire off every 3 to 6 minutes, unless you're in some sort of cockeyed time zone, issue. So they're firing off pretty regularly. My hope is that once our community has 1 or 2 zeros added to the end of it, you're going to see queues firing off very, very fast. And at that point, throwing up another queue that uses different packs from the sets before, not as much of an issue, because they'll also be firing off probably pretty fast as well.
Quickly firing queues would help me quite a bit, because I often find I have to join as the 8th person. If I join as the starter of the queue or halfway through, people will actually drop when they see my name come in. I thought maybe it was random chance initially, but it's a consistent behavior. And I think it helps me because the people who don't want to play against me, I don't think I want to play against them either. But
right.
I haven't done the math on that.
Well, I mean, you can avoid that the same way I do, and you stream a lot, which brings all the people from your stream who are like, I'll just watch this guy draft and cut his cards. And this is, again, entirely off topic, but I'm going to steal another question from Mike here in a second anyway, because... but...
This should be organic, not structured.
Yeah, just the other day we had I was just so obviously stream sniped earlier on in the day, just the person playing against me was clearly making their decisions based on specific cards in my hand, that for the rest of the day I was paranoid it was happening, even though some of the people I was playing against, I was like, I know this person's in the chat, but I also know that they're not the kind of person that would do this. So it was this really weird back and forth, and it got so bad that actually I drafted later. And I was playing alone, and my opponent made a really bad attack that turned out to be really good because the cards that I was representing I didn't have. And I was just like, what is this? Is my stream still on? What's going on?
So one thing to deal with the scarcity issue, and you may have already thought about this, is that whenever a company has a paper TCG, they don't sell all of their stock. They'll still have some in reserves. And this is something Cryptozoic, I'm pretty sure did, but it might have been Upper Deck, where you would have for special side events in WoW TCG at Dark Moon Fairs, you would have Blast from the Past type drafts, where you would say Draft Fire of Outlands type stuff. And so you could easily just print to yourself 1,000 packs and say, okay, this is the scarce pool, these are the things that Cryptozoic has, and we'll occasionally release these for special events. And so you still maintain the scarcity because you're not printing any new packs. These are just the ones that you gave to bought yourself.
No, absolutely we could. It's definitely something I feel like the only issue is that, with a physical TCG, then you have them. People are like, oh, wow, this exists. That's probably what happened. With a digital one, I'm just concerned that...
Oh, people will say that you're just...
Why aren't you just creating the data?
Yeah, right, exactly. No, we actually we generated these back then. We'll check the codes. No, it's definitely something we can do. And again, I don't want to... if something's fun and people are asking for it and it's awesome, then we consider it. But when there's certain things, I feel like we have to be extra conscientious of as a digital game that wants people to feel like their collectibles and their collection have value, and so we just got to be hyper careful. And we have so much. Also, there's so much stuff we're going to be doing. It's just crazy. Blast from the Past packs. Are cool, but I got to tell you, the stuff that we have planned and the kind of features we're going to, continue to put into the game, the larger conceptual plan of what Hex is, which hasn't completely been revealed at this point, is actually pretty amazing. And I think that people will be very excited with how much new stuff is going to be happening over the course of the next, several years.
That's very vague and also promising, but ominous.
Right.
We don't want to kick anybody in the stomach with promises of things that can't happen anymore.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. That's just bad juju altogether.
Nick and I are just forecasting into the future and assume we're going to be nostalgic in 5 years. And it's we're in the glory days of 2-2-1 draft. Those were good days.
Well, no, it's funny you mention it because I still have because me and Mike. We kind of pigeonholed and Five Shards exists because I bugged Mike a bunch. That's really the website that we run exists because I wanted to do a tournament. I had the tangible resources to do it, but I didn't have the necessary time, commitment, and committal to do that. So I was like, Mike, I will do this part if you do this part, and then Five Shards spawned out of that. It was a huge it was a huge like spawn of that. And back then I wrote a single article about the cards that I had the most of, the commons I had the most of out of each shard, that were technically not great cards, but I ended up cutting them so often, or they just happened to be like cards that I felt were slightly more powerful than most people gave credit to. And that was in triple set 1 drafts. So there were things that I had like Blood Cauldron Ritualist,
Right.
which is much harder to make a deck around now. And I hate it because, well, I don't hate that that's the way it is. I understand why it is like that. But I look at Blood Cauldron Ritualist, a card I had over 200 of, and I'm like, man, I loved picking 2 or 3 of those up early and then building my whole deck around it. But now, even if your whole deck is built around it going into pack 3 of the draft format, chances are it's not the one you're picking up. So I haven't even picked up, I'd say 10 or so of them since that point. So the question that I've been hovering around is, you just mentioned rotation was gonna affect how the blocks were, and we were gonna ask you. We know that set 3 is the start of a new, and I use floating air quotes here, block, because we don't have a proper term for that yet. First of all, is the last we heard, this was a set 3 and set 4 were part of the next block, and then a whole new style of rotation started. But the thing is, I guess the bigger question comes down to, is that still the case? And when does set 1 leave the rotation? Do we know that yet?
No.
Okay.
No, not at this point. Again, there are a lot of weird things that we have to deal with because we are building Hex to be sort of unlike anything that's existed before. And so, as an example, set 3 will come out later than I would have wanted if we had a standardized 4-month rotation. Because as you can see, we came out with set 2, what was that, November? December?
December 32nd.
Well, that's November 32nd. But yeah.
Oh, yeah. I thought that was set 2.
We had our first tournament 2 weeks after the release, so was it probably around the 10th or so of December?
Yeah. And so it'll be slightly longer for set 3 than I would have liked. But as we move forward, we're going to be adding all of the other content in the game, all the PvE content. And we're going to be, hopefully, I look at this big arena launch as sort of the starting place for us of public beta and of really marketing the game. We're going to have this growth of people playing. And so when it comes to that first set of rotations out, we're going to have to manage that a little bit by sort of where our player base is, how much product is out there, and sort of how people are playing. So we're going to be a little careful with that first sort of start point of when rotation begins. So I can't really say for certain what that date is and what that set is. But after we make that determination, again, based on player base and everything else, then it will be sort of set in stone, and then it'll be happening like clockwork along with our set releases. So I don't have a great answer for that at this point. But
no, that's actually fine that you don't have a great answer for it, because it's not exactly something that, like, I asked that question realizing that it shouldn't really have a solid answer. It was just something that sprung to mind, especially because the rotation of a pack leaving the format affects a whole lot of things that, like, obviously the game hasn't developed well enough. Like, we don't know if there's an eternal, like, I mean, obviously you have a better idea, but as players, the idea of an eternal format is still on our mind, because, like, we're still in set 1 and 2, but when set 5 rolls around, is constructed going to revolve around certain cards that still existed in set 1? We constantly think about that, and having a solid answer now is probably not even good for the community. So
I mean, and again, the number one goal is to have the healthiest meta possible, and we're pretty happy with where it is right now. And I think once set 3 comes out, it'll be even better. But again, I also want to be real careful about where our player base is as people have been playing with the same cards for quite a while, and we're slowly growing, but I think there's going to become a point where we sort of get a little bit of an exponential growth, and I just want to make sure that people have access to this larger base of cards before we start to sort of pull stuff out. But but it's something that that is our bread and butter, really. I mean, we were, Hex as a company, really the TCG development piece of this is where our abilities are, sort of most relevant. At least it was. I mean, at one point, before we had our complete engineering team built, I mean, when it comes to TCG designers and sort of know-how on how to build and maintain, healthy TCG environments, whether that's set rotations or how to design a game that, works perfectly for draft or all the other very deep components that go into good TCG design, that was sort of our core competency. Interestingly, we've been able to aggregate so many senior engineers that are also TCG experts that I almost feel like our technical abilities are matching our TCG abilities. So as an actual video game developer, we've sort of leveled up and become pretty good. Like I'm very impressed with what we've been able to sort of put together now.
So on that point, I know that when you originally got the client, or the pre-Kickstarter client, you had the ability to basically plug and play cards into it because the way that the Cryptozoic model works, from what I understand, you have the people who do the game design, like Ben Stoll and others, who do it basically on paper, and then the engineers are the ones that implement the cards. Did you lose the capability to plug and play cards when you did the client rewrite, or not the client, the engine rewrite?
No. The card builder tool is a completely separate tool.
Okay.
The way that it works now is the designers actually use the card builder to make the cards, and they're completely developed in the card builder tool. They can spit out physical prints if they want, and then we can shuffle up and play with those to test. But the key components of our development system have the cards input by the game developers. Then we have a parser that actually goes through and auto codes basically the cards, and that works for X percentage of them. And then the ones that it doesn't work, those are the ones where the engineers have to go in and actually finish coding the cards. And then for a small percentage of them, they require brand new code. And so eventually our parser will be able to do all of it. And that's where the game designers being able to make the cards themselves, that's what that really means, is that our parser is able to actually just generate the cards. But with TCGs, we're adding new rules with every set just about. So, there'll be new keywords, or there'll be, very complex interactions, or things that require or should require. We have a couple cards right now that aren't doing a great job of this. That should require a specific menu interface as part of how they work. And so for those cards, clearly engineers and artists have to touch them as well as game designers.
Yeah,
you have a lot of people who develop games and write code in Hex, and so there's been questions about the development process, and that's part of the reason why I want to follow up on how you actually go through and do that. Related back to the 2-2-1 drafts, one of the very weird things about 2-2-1 is that you can't really rely on anything coming your way in pack 1 because it's such a huge set. It's a really, really big set. It's highly variant.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure if you're able to answer this now, but people want to know whether you could tell us about, could you estimate how big set 3 is? Is it kind of set 1 size? Is it between set 2 and set 1? And the question you almost certainly can't answer is how many new mechanics / keywords do you expect in set 3?
I've set the floor for our sets at 250 cards.
Okay.
So I think it's right around 250. I think they just came in slightly under that just to annoy me. No, I don't mean it that way. I think it ended up coming. They come in at the place where they need to be to make them great. So I think that it's right around 250 cards. I like the slightly larger sets because I feel like it. Again, I'm very much a drafter, and so having those larger sets allows us to have a nice variance, as you mentioned. It's one of the things that made draft in set 1 so much fun, where there are so many archetypes that you could sort of chase in draft. So I like the slightly larger sets. I would imagine in the future that the minimum would be 250, and they could go all the way up to 350, just depending on where we are in a block. I believe there's actually 3 new keywords in set 3.
Okay. 3 new ones. Oh, that's fantastic. It's if sets ever reach a point where this is just idle-minded talk. Like I don't design TCGs. It's just me speaking out loud. But as far as I've ever thought in my head, it's funny that you mentioned that it was fun to chase a bunch of archetypes, because I always remember being a little bit on the downtrodden when I was chasing, say, like Briar Legions, and the set is so large that you can't guarantee Briar Legions will come around. So sometimes you get 12, sometimes you get 2, even though you're the only one drafting wild. So as far as like a 3 set block goes, I think that like that would take smaller sets to make it all cohesive. But that's just me speaking about a subject that we were talking about that I have no actual knowledge about.
No, you're not incorrect. Sometimes the first set in a block can be slightly bigger, so especially if you're building. Say for instance, we open up a new area in the world, and thematically we have lots of keywords, lots of stuff going on, and we want to set the tone for this new block. Having a slightly larger first set actually does work. To help make that happen. But you're not incorrect that the larger the set, the more difficult it is to sort of draft an archetype. But the upside was, of course, that there were just a bunch of archetypes, and the way that Ben and the team put it together, often though they dovetailed into each other, and so you could sort of draft a hybrid, and it would be this really fun, like, oh look, I made this, like I mentioned earlier. You could find some things that work together in a very odd way, which was, half the fun of, when it was, set one draft. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely one of the things that we watch very closely.
So you mentioned, just changing topics and gears entirely here, you were on Cyrus's stream for his birthday. Everyone was very excited. You mentioned a big Hex community event, or a big event that the Hex community would be excited for. You weren't really able to touch on it a whole lot. You were especially cautious about revealing anything that the whole tone of the stream seemed to be that you didn't want to reveal too much at the time. And obviously we're not expecting any new news, but we have to ask, is there any more news about that? Is there something you can touch on that? It sounded like you were talking about a large tournament. It sounded like just some sort of big event coming, and now obviously we've got the queues firing with larger numbers. So if there's anything you can talk about there, that's, I suppose, the question.
Yeah, unfortunately, not yet. I mean, I think that in the very near future, the big thing is we have, we just had Arena has now just launched, and I think that I want to make sure everyone and all the focus is on Arena, and we have a ton of marketing that's going to be going out there. We're going to try and start to really build the community now that we have this PvE component, this sort of free-to-play component. But as that starts to die down a little bit, I think that's probably when we're going to have another pretty major announcement about a big event coming up. And again, this will be something that helps bring an entirely, sort of serve the group of people playing it now, but also hopefully bring in a slightly different group of people into the game. Mm-hmm. And I think it's something people are going to be very excited about. But yeah, I don't want to spoil that surprise, especially when I hope everyone's living in the glow of us finally launching some PvE content.
So based on this and the previous comment, we are going into publicly open beta probably shortly after the Arena launches. Everything's looking good.
Correct. I'm
marketing bucks turn.
Happy to call it open beta. The big thing for me was just the reason I didn't call it before. We weren't really doing marketing. I really didn't want to start driving people into the game because I didn't feel like that onboarding process was as clear as I would like. And I didn't want to drive people into the game and then get there. But one, I don't know what this is. How do I play? There's not enough for me to do. It just wasn't ready for that. And so I feel like now with how we've changed around some of the menu interfaces, that we kind of have a little thing you can scroll through and see what everything means on the screens. You know, our tutorial, which admittedly could be better, and that's one of the things that we're working on improving. And then also the ability to play Arena at your own pace. Give it a try. Play a little bit. Come back to it. Mess around with it. It gives you something to do that's not high pressure and allows you the chance to sort of fall in love with the game. And I feel like that was what we needed before we can sort of turn on the marketing, before I would feel comfortable personally starting to tell people, yeah, you should come try the game. Check it out. I feel like we're there. And so and again, it could be better. Absolutely. If I had endless time and resources, you know, I am a fanatic for polish, and I nitpick everything. So yeah, everything could be better. But I think at this point we're at the place where we can honestly say we're excited and happy to have people come in and give it a try.
That's great to hear. So this is 2 questions ago we asked you about the surprise that you can't tell us about yet. I think this is a slightly different question, but if it ends up being the same question, just let us know. So the VIP program right now is basically the biggest Hex-sponsored PvP event that goes on in terms of attendance. You get over 128 people.
Yep.
And based on both the trials that you've been doing the last couple of weeks, you're doing tomorrow and trying to get more people on the tournament server, and also I know you've been working on code to try to make the events not just 4-round events, but you actually have Swiss events, and I've seen code in the client that suggests that eventually you want tournaments to break to top 8 or top 16 or something like that to make a Mason tournament.
Correct.
Do you what are your short-term goals for organized play? Are you going to, I mean, because being able to schedule stuff is great, you have drafts firing all the time and VIPs, but do you have other things in mind that you want organized play to look like in the next couple, I guess, months?
Yeah, absolutely. The big, you know, tournament, like I think you mentioned the pro player tier tournament. Is that what you were talking about?
We can be.
Yeah,
sure.
So that was one of the things that people have brought up, and it's one of the things we definitely want to do. But when it comes to the larger esports component, yes, that is something that, I mean, clearly that's what all that effort for making large-scale tournaments work is part of that esports plan. I mean, you know, again, having been a competitive card player, someone who loves esports deeply. I mean, even in the Kickstarter pitch, we talked about how much we wanted esports to be part of what Hex is. The thing is, we can't do any esports until we have that, you know, the tournament systems polished and working perfectly. I think it would be very frustrating to people to try and play seriously in tournaments for large cash prizes if there were bugs and glitches that, you know, had you losing or not getting, you know, the credit that you deserved. So that's why we put so much focus on that system. I mean, you think about all the things that we have to do still, and those large scale tournaments, I mean, in some ways can look like, wow, why is there so much time spent on that when you got so many other things you're trying to do? But it really, really is about the esports part. And it's something that I'm trying to accelerate and make happen as quickly as possible, because I definitely feel like when you play a TCG, when you're serious about it, and when you spend all this time building constructed decks, and you watch the meta, and you talk to people, and you form communities around practicing, well, you know, that's fun as long as there are systems in place to make that mean something. And that's why I am so incredibly grateful to you guys for what you've done, putting together, you know, sort of community-driven tournaments, because you've really given that piece of the game a chance to have some meaning. And it means the world to me, because it wasn't something that I could tackle yet, and yet you guys came in and filled the gap. And I think it's helped tremendously to make people feel like their cards have value, or their time has value in terms of mastering the game. And so that is why we've been running those big tournaments, and that is why we've had that big focus, is because I want esports accelerated as quickly as possible.
Oh, thank you.
That's awesome, because we certainly have just as much. Honestly, the whole esports thing has been a huge thing for both of us as far as things go. So just to hear that that's something that still excites you is exciting.
It's a huge focus for me. I'll tell you too, the VIP tournaments for the alternate art cards. The funny thing was, when I put together that, I wrote up the whole VIP program originally, and I originally called it a subscription, and then I changed the term because people are like, well, people are going to think this is a subscription game. And I'm like, what? So I went through and I changed around the VIP program multiple times, and I threw in the tournament with alternate art cards as sort of an afterthought. The real thing was I just wanted to give people a chance to buy like at least a pack a week for half price, so they could kind of have a little bit of a, oh yeah, I gotta go open my new my new hex pack. I get one every whatever Wednesday. That's kind of fun, and so it's it's only $4 a month or whatever, and so the tournament was really just sort of an afterthought. And to see how passionate people are about the alternate art cards and how excited they get to be in these tournaments it blows my mind. It makes me so happy that I threw that in, because it's been the one place where people really got together to sort of play competitively outside of the community driven stuff. But man, that was just an afterthought. Holy Moses, I'm so happy.
Well, that's part of the reason why I'm asking you that part of the question, is because we are getting new players, and once we get to open beta, we're going to have a ton of new players. We have a writer who just started working for us within the last week, well, actually the last day, really.
The last 24 hours.
Who is going to focus on esports. He's going to write profiles of the top performing players, things like that. But he's brand new, and he wanted to know if there's any way for him to get into the VIP tournaments, and unfortunately there's not. And the idea of offering alternate arts is fantastic. It's not costless to you guys because you have to pay an artist and do all that fun stuff, but it's also something that's very obviously attractive to the community.
It's definitely, it was, as I said, it wasn't the intent. This is how it's working out now. Super counterintuitive. Like, I don't want the new players to feel like, oh, the coolest big tournament there is to play is one that I can't get in. That is massively counterintuitive. But it's sort of worked out that way. So that's, again, why once I can get all the tournament stuff locked down, I can really roll out our esports plan. And then I think at that point, people are going to be like, the VIPs are fun. It's great to get those alternate art cards. But that focus in terms of like, whoa, these are the big tournaments and the qualifiers and the big one. These are the big deal. I think that's the time when people are really going to be like, whoa, this is amazing. So that's why I'm trying to accelerate it, trying to make it a big focus for us.
We're pretty excited about that too, because that means we can actually play in tournaments, which is a nice change of pace compared to the last 4 months.
Yeah, specifically me and Mike, since obviously our tournament only has 2 players restricted.
Nice. The amazing thing too, you talked about hey, I love Colin comes here. Colin was here Wednesday and he played D&D with us, so it's so awesome. Having Colin come into the office and hang out with us, and he put up prizes for the tournament. That's amazing. I love that there's this real cash component coming from the community first, but it's still definitely part of what I'm planning for Hex. Real cash prizes is absolutely something that's going to occur for Hex, and hopefully much sooner than later.
Nice.
And I think you'll be very excited also by the scale of things.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I Dungeon Master for Colin on Sundays. So
nice. He was cheating on you.
No, I'll have to make sure his wizard suffers some sort of terrible fate for that. So as far as esports goes, one of the biggest reasons that me and Mike and the community that's driven around the tournament are able to do things right now is because Twitch basically exists. It enables us to stream featured matches, which are a big deal within the community. It enables us to keep people updated with round timers and the brackets, and obviously there's a lot of tools there that will eventually be integrated into the client themselves. So without going into the obvious ones, because obviously you've mentioned that spectating matches in some way will be available. Is there any chance that Twitch chat integration will be a thing? I know that that's not a huge thing for all developers, but there are some games that choose to let it happen, and I'm not really sure how hard it is on the development side, but as a streamer and for the sake of the tournaments, having Twitch chat available opens up quite a few options. So,
I know it's not on our schedule right now, and I know that we've talked to the guys at Twitch. We love those guys. They've been super supportive of us, and it's something that I think that we've talked about and wanting to do. But at at this point, the focus has again been on just getting tournaments to work. But I will talk to the guys about it. That's a very good comment. Like, can we get that up and running? Because some of the spectator mode and some of the other stuff we want to do, I know that's still a little ways away too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's not like a tomorrow thing.
No.
But you mean that's not coming Tuesday? I'm out.
That's right. I will ask about the Twitch chat integration. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, because I ask about it mostly because of the tournaments that we run, but also just from the sake of a casual streamer. Like, obviously, I'm not one of the partnered streamers. I don't get paid to do it. I currently have Hex in a slightly smaller window than I normally would, and I have Twitch chat popped out on the side because if you're ever watching VODs of something later, like the videos on demand, having the chat on the side, like, if the streamer is talking to the chat, if you're interacting with the chat, which you do a lot, especially in a TCG environment, it really loses a lot of the value if you don't see the chat. Like, if somebody asked me, why didn't you play your Crackling Rod on this? Why did you play it there? And I just I read their question, but I don't read it out loud, and then I respond. Obviously, having the chat on screen. So it was a little bit of a self-serving question, but I'm glad.
No, I think that Twitch is incredibly important to us, and the ability for streamers to make the most compelling experience is incredibly important. So sometimes those little things that we don't realize are things that are potentially very easy to do and can have a big impact. So I'm going to absolutely talk to Lena about it on Monday, and we'll have the conversation.
Awesome. It's the little things are a big part. Sorry to cut you off there, Mike. The little things are. There's another game. There are basically two games that steal all of my attention right now, and Hex is obviously one of them. Here I am sitting talking about it. But Path of Exile is a game that I use to get my action-adventure RPG fix in, and their developers are basically, I wouldn't say in the same boat as you guys. Like, they have a totally different business model and a totally different game entirely, but much like you, the lead developer of Path of Exile spends a lot of time reading all the forum comments and all of the, like you were mentioning how you visited Reddit and all of that, and occasionally drops like separate little comments, just like little tidbits of the future in both the forum and Reddit, and it's kind of those little things that keep the community really excited and positive and on his side. Obviously, that game's much further in development, but it just tied in with what you just said. So,
I'm actually friends with the guy who started that company.
That's amazing. You should give him several high fives.
I will.
So, go ahead.
No.
I want to ask a little bit more about the plan for organized play without getting into too many details. I know that Cryptozoic and the company before it that handled HexTCG was pretty good at dealing with coverage of major tournaments like Dark Moon Fairs. In fact, one of my enjoyable memories from the minis game from Upper Deck Entertainment was that it was a finals round. I was playing against an opponent who was sick, and it was after like 10 hours of play. It was best of 5, and minis games lasted 90 minutes, and Will Brinkman was doing the coverage for the game, and he was just miserable the entire time of watching this very slow, control-based minis game, and people making errors because one guy was sick, and we're tired and all of that. And this is all just because I want to share the story, but also, do you plan on having official Hex coverage and shoutcasting once the organized play stuff goes live?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what makes it fun to watch. I mean, some of the, and again, many of the people here are people who have done that kind of thing in the past. When it came to WoW TCG, even in the very, casual atmosphere Dark Moon Fairs, we definitely had people that did, I think, a pretty good job shoutcasting some of those matches. And so 100%. And again, also I don't think there's any lack of showmanship here at the Hex. I think it's definitely one of the things that we take a lot of pride in is that we try to make things fun, and we're not a big company, so we don't have to worry about a lot of people having awkward opinions about us kind of being goofy about stuff. So you'll see like with that stream with Ben and I being just goofy and fun and making sure that people were enjoying watching it. I imagine that when it comes to shoutcasting, it's going to be great. Will works here with me. So that's funny that you say that.
Well, that's why I mentioned it, because I know he still works with you.
Yeah. Yeah, not doing that anymore, but that's hilarious. I can imagine Will getting frustrated in that.
Just judging on a couple of email conversations with him, I can imagine it.
Yeah.
Well, I know when you had articles and coverage before, you also tapped out on community members. So, if you ever are looking for people, I know Penta does about 14 hours of straight casting for us on tournament weekends. He might be someone you want to look at.
Oh, for sure.
Just to embarrass him a bit.
Yeah, that would be a dream.
No, I feel like the people, again, I'm a big believer in, like I've told all the people here, I mean, coming to work at, to work on Hex, to be part of this small team, I mean, there's a ton of risk. You're at a little tiny indie-ish type developer, and a lot of people here are very talented and have very interesting and unique skill sets, and they get approached by larger companies all the time, like people trying to poach my people constantly, and everyone stays here not because of a paycheck, but because of a passion for what we're trying to accomplish. And so I am endlessly loyal to the people that we have here because they have been loyal to the vision of what Hex could be and to me. And so when it comes to extending that, and this is really how I am in life, I'm fair to a fault, and I also always try to take care of everyone. And so the part where the people that have really stepped up and tried to help us build this game, build a community, be such a great part of making this happen, like I've said with everyone in the Kickstarter, I don't take that lightly. And so like when it comes to opportunities to help grow this community, help grow the game, the first people I'm going to look at are the people that were here when it was basically nothing. And so yes, having you guys be involved, having shoutcasting come from those original people who were doing such a great job streaming us, I feel like that's something that is an absolute no-brainer for me.
Sweet.
Andre, I mean, he does a great job. I mean, he's got some really good people. So,
it's funny. That conversation brings me back to I actually applied for the community manager position, and I think my email got lost in the swarm of far more qualified employees, and obviously Fantia is doing a great job of that now. But
it's funny. The original person that we brought in was a community member.
Shaggy.
Yeah, and amazing. I love Dusty. I think he's a great guy. I feel like eventually, I mean, he had some personal stuff going on. He wanted to get married, and the person he was marrying didn't want to move, and so there was some personal stuff, which is sort of why we ended up sort of changing things around. But one of the things that we did realize was that we need to be careful. I mean, it's so compelling to hire people out of the community, but we also need to be careful because we have some pretty demanding tasks ahead of us, and so finding that perfect blend, especially with very technical jobs, which, as it turns out, the community management stuff is actually very technical. Finding people who are super passionate about the game and are also experts in their field has been the place where we've sort of had the most success. So we have to always be careful. That's where Sean Silverman, our community manager now, or actually director of communications. He has been on the project for a very long time. Actually, he was on the project way before the Kickstarter, back when it was in its other incarnations. He was part of it, and he has always been passionate about this game. Even when he was working at Blizzard, he would still come over every game night, hang out with us, and want to know what's going on, and offer us advice if he could. He's just always been super passionate about Hex, and so when things worked out where we could bring him on here, it was like hiring a community member, basically, but someone who also had a ton of experience, so it's just a huge win for us.
Nice. Well, you also picked up Mantic, who was obviously very engaged in the community before he started working QA for you all.
Yep. That's how it happened. He was very passionate and part of the community. He came to some game nights and would come out and hang out at game nights, and then it just kind of one-to-one came together, and we're like, oh yeah, for sure, we'd love to have you come be part of QA. So
if we want to get hired there, we should stalk you in your office, is what you're saying.
Pretty much. Just start coming to game nights, and eventually I'll feel guilty and give you a job.
Yep, that was the original plan. I'm actually in a really comfortable position up here in Canada, doing really well in a fairly young age, and I remember we were having Skype conversations about it. I think, Mike, it was around the time me and Mike had got to know each other through Hex, and I was humming and hawing about even sending in a resume. First of all, because my qualifications were not exactly what was listed, so I never had high hopes, but also because if you guys ever did end up picking my resume, I was in a situation where it would take me out of a secure position and put me into something that like was essentially a dream job, and I was like, well, maybe sometimes personal goals are better than that. So like all the risks and just the thought process of that, it's actually just made me think about how long this community has been and how it's kind of worked in. Like I got to meet Mantic through Mike, who I got to meet through the streaming community, who I got to meet through, like, it's crazy how this it's hardly 2 years at this point, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy how much it's twined together.
I know, it's incredible. And again, it's, I think a testament to how positive and open and sort of mature the community is that it's everyone's sort of friends and everyone supports each other, and you got Colin flying people in for different tournaments and conventions, and you have the streamers all hooking up together or helping support the community driven tournaments. I mean, I couldn't ask for a better community. It's absolutely crazy how great it is.
I also just, brief comment. You all have been very classy about the work prior to the Kickstarter and not naming the company that worked on it or blaming anyone for anything. You basically have owned the process, even though what you end up having was much, much different than what you thought you had at one point.
Yeah.
I guess maybe this is just standard professional conduct, but it seems like a lesser people would just say, oh, it's all their fault, and so I'm impressed by that.
It's funny, like there's a long, I should probably write a book at some point about the development of Hex as a game, but the long and twisting road that started off with me having a bit of a professional setback at Cryptozoic. I got some news about something, and it really impacted me deeply. It was about another product we were working on, and then I was very upset. I was sitting in my car crying, and then I was like, you know what? I'm so angry right now. I went back to the office, and I got out these 3 giant wheelie whiteboards that I had and put in my office, and I sat there and I mapped out everything that Hex was going to be. It was all the stuff that I had sort of talked about or thought about or written down different places in terms of what I thought the perfect digital MMOTCG could be, and all these great ideas. And there's a bunch of stuff that no one's heard of that we're all on that whiteboard too, and mapping that thing out. And from that moment to where we are now, the twisty road is absolutely crazy. I mean, I feel like I've won the lottery 6 times to have the game be where it is now. Like, the Kickstarter was one of those lottery wins. There have literally been 5 other lottery wins, basically, that this game even exists. And again, all the people along that path, everyone who's tried to help make this vision a reality, every single one of them did the best that they could. And even if things didn't work out, none of them were malicious. None of them tried any less than 100%. And you know what? But people don't realize circumstances and reality and what really goes into making something creative is so much greater than you could imagine, and includes so much risk, both personally and professionally, for everyone involved, that it's mind-boggling. And again, I know I've had to bet everything on Hex multiple times, and that we've actually gotten here, that I actually won every single one of those bets, is just crazy. And so I would never, as you mentioned before about being classy, about not talking about people, I would never for a moment have anything negative to say about anyone who's been involved with the development of Hex, or with bringing Hex to, to sort of where it is now. I
had a kind of sneaking suspicion that Hex might have been born out of the ashes of an unannounced internal project that your community was demanding from you, and so yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, not quite what that, but it was definitely born out of the ashes of or the what was going to be the ashes of something. That's for sure.
That's
fair enough.
That's pretty touching. Like, I hope in the future that everything related to all events becomes settled, and you are actually able to
all the stuff that upset me so much that led to me saying I've got to make this other thing. Although it's all been resolved. I mean, that was resolved.
Oh yeah. No, I just meant down the road. I hope you're in a position where writing a book is actually something you have both the time and full discrepancy to do, because obviously
I absolutely will. There's no reality where I will sign or do anything that puts me in a position where I can't tell the entirety of this story. I mean, I haven't. And so I would definitely do it. Although maybe I should just write it as I'll say this jokingly, a series of blog posts after doing such a piss poor job of writing that blog.
It's actually something, we had a question about it on when I was streaming. I was asking people about questions, and it was one that I mentally noted to write down here, but then didn't. It's just about the blog. Are there still any plans to get back to that, or because a lot of us really enjoyed it?
You know what? It's writing for me. I love it. I loved writing the blog. It's just a weird thing. I always felt like if I were being consistent, then the level of, I don't know a better way to put it, but quality, I don't know how interesting they are. I feel like it could go down because it's like quantity versus quality, right? And because I do it so infrequently, I feel like every one of them has to be perfect, and I'm a very harsh critic of myself. And so then I'm always just sort of, the internal critic is always stopping me from doing it. Whereas I felt like if I were doing it consistently, then I could write one that was goofy about just about anything. But I feel like I do it so infrequently, I write a goofy one. Somebody suggested, like writing about waffles. Like, I feel like then it'd be like, holy Moses, what is this? I don't want to, who does this guy think he is? And so I'm always trying to make sure they mean something. And so it's kind of overblown in my mind maybe a little bit. And so then it really stifles me. Plus we've got, I bet there's just so much going on also that, switching hats from running business stuff to trying to be creative to doing management to all the different things that I try to do, switching hats is actually kind of tough, and it can take time. I'm not one of those people that does a really great job sort of turning on a dime for each of these different things, and especially when it comes to the creative side, like when I would write part of the Lookouts comics, or I coming up with and writing all the stuff for Epic Spell Wars or whatever it is.
You wrote part of Lookouts?
Yeah. So in the merit badge section in the back, I wrote those.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I made up all the merit badges and then wrote that section in the back.
I'm going to just have a little smug moment and say that I knew that. So, haha, Mike.
I love the Lookout so much.
Which actually ties back to the whole reason that most of the very early on going people actually know is the whole Penny Arcade stuff. That one 3-panel comic tying to the Kickstarter. It's not even so much the comic that got to me. Actually, we're talking about writing and all of this. So I've always had two big passions in my life. One of them's gaming, obviously, and the other is writing. And I've had several long rejection letters over novel ideas that I've submit to major publishers. And one of my favorite writers of all time is actually Jerry Holkins.
Yeah.
And so I religiously read the news posts that he puts on for new comics. So I actually read about Hex before I saw the Penny Arcade comic, and then eventually went on to be a Kickstarter backer. So
really, so you came to Hex via Penny Arcade?
I would say the majority of people that I've known since the Kickstarter did.
Wow.
Like more people than any I know will mention that comic as being the one where you're represented as the devil. I'm sure you remember, as the stone that threw the water. Because again, it wasn't necessarily the comic itself; it was the passionate way that Jerry actually talked about the project. And
I love those Mike and Jerry. I love very deeply. They're I talk about often like a community of, in the games and entertainment industry, especially the gamey entertainment industry. There are a bunch of people out there that are friends that I consider kind of the good guys, and they always try and do what's right. I mean, I've known lots of people like I said, I've been in the video games industry for 23 years. I've known lots of schlocky, dirty, there's plenty of people that I would rather not have association with. But then you find these people, and a lot of them are friends that are just really good people that always try and do what's right, try and take care of people. And I got to tell you, Mike and Jerry are, I mean, just as genuine as can be. The way that they represent themselves is 100% accurate to who they are as people. And they are just absolutely great people. I mean, like, there's no other way to put it. They're the real deal. And I saw all the stuff that they posted, and it meant so much to me. But there's a bunch of people out there in the industry that are absolutely amazing. Like, I have good friends at Jinx or Valve or Obsidian, and I love that you can associate with people in this industry and have them be sort of good guys. And Mike and Jerry are a couple of the best guys I've met in the entire industry.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Random question, now that that's mentioned. Any chance that Mike's gonna do the art for a card?
Oh, I would love to.
That would be hilarious.
that would be awesome. That's a good idea. It seems like they've gotten so busy. Holy Moses, with all the PAXs. They seem to be getting busier and busier as time goes on, which is great. That's very awesome. I would love to. We've talked about it in the past. I don't know why we haven't done it. We should.
Well, there's obviously just a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I remember. I've known those guys for a very long time, and I remember back when I first. I mean, I pitched the WoW TCG at my interview to work at Upper Deck, along with all of the innovation in the game, like loot cards and raids and all that stuff. It was all during my interview process. And then when I got hired, I was tasked with starting to get that going. And one of the big points that I sold to Blizzard in terms of doing the WoW TCG was about all the amazing artists that we could have. And it really resonated because Blizzard, and especially senior management, they're very art-centric. And one of the people I mentioned that would be awesome would be to have Mike do some art. And so it was so great being able to get the project rolling and then actually be able to go to Mike and get him to do, Leroy and make some of that art, have some of the art be done by Mike. It was just so great.
Well, the original Devil comic about WoW TCG is basically about you as well, right? Because it's about how to get people to play WoW when they're not playing WoW. Yeah. Which is weird, because then you made the game, the arcade game, where the Devil that is you is one of the boss characters that you defeat.
I put him in there as one of the bosses because I loved that comic. The original, because Mike he does something digital now, but he used to actually draw the comics out by hand and then scan them and then make them digital. The original Blizzard making a WoW TCG Devil comic, I have the original. He gave it to me. He actually signed it to me. I have it framed in my office.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So, Penta, did you have the next question?
I'm sure I did. I've forgotten what we had written down at this point. We did have a couple of a little more lighthearted questions, I suppose.
Well, hold on. I want to make sure you're asking the hard questions. Because I read the Reddit stuff, it seems like I always get asked the exact same questions, apparently. And so I'm just rehashing all the same stuff.
Well,
I'm racking my brains to say, what could I say that no one's heard that isn't...
You've said a lot that people haven't heard.
Yeah, no, this is... even if this were to not go any farther, which it is going to, sorry, we're going to keep you chained here for a lot longer. It's...
Fentio's going to listen to this and yell at you for something.
Yeah. I'm curious, like the... I want to tell you stuff, but then I don't want to be kicking someone in the stomach. So I've got this, gotta walk that fine line.
Yeah, well, that fine line is something that you've gotten really good at walking, honestly, because we're all sat here at this point, not kicked in the stomach, but really wanting you to kick us in the stomach. Like, please tell us more. But there were a couple of things that came up I thought about earlier. First of all, without giving away too much, do any Cryptozoic employees play in any of the community tournaments under pseudonyms?
Yes, absolutely they do.
Okay, well, they clearly need to step up their game. That's the only thing I can say, because we've interviewed and talked to the winners, and that wasn't them. So all of that, I'm going to bring this back to a giant thing that we talked about on the podcast like 20 episodes ago. That secret the Tier 1 deck that we were all missing from Set 1 clearly did not pan out. So
no, yeah. But actually, I think the people who have I don't think it's been any of the R&D people. So I think it's other people. And so the R&D guys are sort of tier 1 competitive players. But I'm not sure, outside of probably Woods, who isn't focused on it, but if he focused, I'm sure he could be. Chris Woods is a tier 1 competitive player in just about any game he tries. I mean, he was highest ranking possible in StarCraft. Pretty much any game that he sets his mind to, he masters. It's very, it's unreal.
Second place on Hexperty, though.
Yep, second place on Hexperty to the reigning champion.
All right.
Who knows the most about Hex? That's the only time I'll ever brag about that.
So I think that outside of the R&D group and Chris Woods, most of the other guys are probably not, sort of that competitive level tier 1 player. So yeah, if that's probably why they're not in that top 8, I'm guessing. But I know that we have people who have played in them, absolutely.
Well, make sure those R&D guys listen to this, and hopefully our goading comments will bait them into it, because higher attendance is always awesome.
Yeah. So there's been some discussion about resource costs, and you don't want to focus too much on things that are too expensive and don't have much payout. I imagine there are cards that you liked that you want to see implemented but required too many developmental resources or assets that you just didn't put into set 1 or set 2. Are there cards like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So ones that were on the borderline, ones that we probably shouldn't have put in because they're not executed very well. Like the Kismet card is a great example. You click on the Luxax, what the hell's happening? That's terrible. It's not a good execution.
Is there some sort of obviously it doesn't really matter that much. Most of us know what the Luxax do if we cared. Is there an interface coming to help improve that at some point?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it's definitely it's one of those things, right? Though it seems trivial, but it's actually a ton of work. And so you probably shouldn't have put that card in the game, but I just loved it so much that put it in. And then, making that interface stuff, that has a real cost. It's not a trivial thing. And so some of the cards, there have been interface components that probably should have been done better. And for sure there are cards that we've cut. I mean, 100% there are cards that we've cut that were amazing, but just had too high an engineering cost. You look at Eternal Drifter is another one that we were able to get in that does, it's been bugged often, but when it works, I love that card deeply.
Digitally pretty interesting. Will I still be able to become a Master of Time in the next week or so, or is that something that's delayed?
I don't believe that equipment is quite in yet.
Okay.
Didn't that equipment... Oh, yeah, no, we got to find out what the... I remember that's one of the... As the dirty sneak I am, when the 7 Hex... The streamers that are on the mainstream... we don't really have a term for that, but when we all got access to the client 7 hours early so that we could make sure everything worked and was set up, I remember I was sitting there in my own happy little world reading all of the equipment. Well, I probably shouldn't have been, but I was like, oh my god, look at all of this, oh, we know what the Master of Time does now.
No, what the Master of Time does.
What?
Did it say? It shouldn't have said.
If we're talking about Time Bug, the equipment for Time Bug, when I had the client, said what it did.
Yeah, but
that might not be the actual effect.
Hold on. How many pieces of equipment were there?
There were 2.
2. And one of them said one thing, and then didn't one of them say...
One of them is the one that we know always, that you can have 8, which is why most people don't actually have a full playset of set 1, is because you should have 8 Time Bugs. The other one said it said Master... I can't spoil it. I guarantee you it told me a very specific effect.
Time Bug's the Master of Time, and then it told you what it does?
Yes.
Okay, Dan and I had a conversation...
Now...
No, hold on. Dan and I just recently, 2 weeks ago, had a conversation about this very issue, and I told him that's not how I want it executed. I want them to say... I want them to be...
intentionally vague things.
Yes. There's going to be a certain number of equipments that are going to have a vague thing on there, and you're going to be like, nice. What the hell is this? and then you're gonna have to equip it, and you're gonna have to have whatever series of events occur, and then you'll see it happen.
Well,
so it's supposed to still be vague. So there was, I think, a week there where it had both on it, where they wanted to be more. Players want to know, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, this is for fun.
It's funny you mentioned that one would have been a fairly. So this comes down to two pieces of thing. I don't want to talk about it specifically because obviously you want it to be a secret, and I don't want to ruin that. Even though I do believe that while we were on those main streams and those equipment were available, some people did post that. So you could really go back and spoil yourself if you wanted to, but if you're hearing this podcast and you didn't have it spoiled, it might be a better idea not to. But what was it? It was such an obvious effect. So if it is still that same effect, which it might not be, I think people would catch that one pretty quickly, and they would be pretty excited about it. Which you talk about leaving these things vague, and you've gotten a lot of flack, specifically things like Kismet's Reverie, and probably a more relevant and discussed example, Gortazuma, and the Mushwalkie, cards that are fun in the way they interact with just being a card. Gortazuma refuses to block. He just won't do it, And personally, I really love that you did that. And maybe it wasn't exactly your decision, but I remember you were talking about and defending the idea of cards that did things that weren't A, competitive, and B, I mean, you might have to read once or twice, but, they explained flavor instead of just saying cannot block. I think that's amazing. I really appreciate that kind of stuff, and I know you've gotten a lot of flack for it, but having more of that is not going to hurt my feelings at all, because it's especially done in nice moderation. People always talk about Kismet's Reverie. They're like, oh, that's the Comet Strike of set 2. Well, sets need Comet Strikes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. This is one of those things where as many people love it, hate it. And so, like, I'm in the middle. I'm like, okay, well, what do you do? And I feel like getting rid of it, I think that the key is balance. Don't do too much of it. So I think doing a little bit of that is fun, and it adds flavor to the game. And, I tend to push the envelope in terms of trying to do things that are novel and wacky and weird. And so when it comes to doing things that are a little different or a little odd, I'm probably going to always err towards doing that. The key is to just not overdo it. And so I feel like we'll be able to find that place where we have some of that stuff in the game, and it becomes fun because you're not overwhelmed by it. But cutting it all together seems like a huge loss to me. So you will continue to see some of that stuff in the game.
Well, it's probably the modes of the population base presently, where a lot of people who are actively playing Hex on a day-to-day basis are mostly interested in PvP and competitive stuff.
Yeah.
Well, once you get a lot more PvE players in here, they will love the process of discovery. This is a puzzle. I want to know what it does. Let's go figure it out.
Yeah. What does the Master of Time do?
Yeah, competitive players want to know exactly what it does from the get-go, and they don't want to be confused by it because they're going to play in a tournament and want to make sure it works the way they expect it to.
I just didn't feel like that guy was all that confusing. I mean,
that's the funny thing about it, right? Like, is nobody complained about the Mushwalkie because, it's always hungry. Like, that's just right on the card. But some people were like, well, Gortazuma says he refuses to block. Does that mean... The biggest debate that I remember was people were like, if somebody plays Pheromones and a troop has to block, does having to block out refuses to block? Like, is that... Just what works out here? The wording is confusing. And I was always like, that's just silly. Like, it's clearly just a rewording of it cannot block. Like... But that... It always made me wonder, like, what the difference between the Mushwalkie and Gortazuma was.
Gortazuma does not fall for your scent. He's not interested.
Gortazuma is one of the 5 high clerics of Cogtapetal, can say whatever he wants to me, and I will listen with an open ear. As just to lead this all into something that might be a little bit spoilery, is there a card in set 3 that follows that sort of tradition? Have you snuck a fun card in? Yes?
Yeah. I think there's actually a couple.
Oh, there's a couple. Oh, man. So people who like to be mad know that I will be there defending that situation the whole time because I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
a little more technical and away from that. Currently, we basically have separate regions for gardens for two regions now: North America and EU, and LA. Will we see one for Asia sometime in the near future?
Yeah, before the end of the year.
Awesome. Is there?
Are you working with a partner for that?
Yeah, Perfect World.
Okay.
Oh, wow, nice. Is there any current standing items in the client that might be an issue when transitioning over to different gardens? Because I know that some larger games back in the day had a hard time swapping from into certain Asia markets just because art and other...
Well, showing Undead.
I was just trying to be...
Yeah, you can see he used to use it as his avatar, but you remember Alex's avatar was the headless executioner with a head?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Okay.
That art was changed for China. So China, they can't show any bones or blood, and so they actually go in and illustrate over a lot of our images to make them appropriate for their market.
Nice. Huh.
A lot of the zombies end up getting like these weird mouth masks that make them look like robots or like some kind of weird construct-y sort of things. And then they paint just enough flesh over the bones so you can't see the bones. The headless executioner got a head. It's pretty
changed entirely.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But whatever. It's just like I understand that these markets are different than ours, and so I look to our partners who are experts in those markets to help make sure the game is successful. The other thing, when it comes to the right now, EU and US, they're one garden. Latin America, which includes Brazil and all those areas, they are a separate garden. China, at one point, we had wanted to have this backbone server where all Hex players could enter into tournaments together. I think that the way it's going to work out, that's not going to be possible for China because of the regulations.
Yeah.
Sadly. But I still think that's on tap for Latin America. And also, interestingly, all of their pricing models are all the same. So they didn't even have to change their pricing. So we could even open it up broader and let some trading. But that's probably not in the cards at this point. Yeah, we do want to open up this back-end international server that it populates your little tournament screen, and you see the little international symbol. And those, if you entered into those, that would actually be with people that were in the Latin American markets, or eventually if we put a partner in place for Korea and for Japan. But China, I think, is going to have to always sort of stay its own walled garden, just because their regulations are just totally different.
The Chinese art reworks can also give you a cheap way to have alternate arts for the other servers too.
That's so funny. I was just looking. I was just looking at, and again, I give the partners some leeway in terms of coming up with marketing for their territories. As you can see, you've probably seen with some of the Latin America stuff, that's a little different.
Yeah, there's Filipino Revolutionary Mercenary at one point.
Although that actually that company actually has some changes, and we're actually not Level Up is not doing it in the Philippines anymore. I currently don't have a partner in the Philippines, and that I don't think that champion will ever actually come to be. But they actually the Chinese publisher just sent over a presentation to me. And the Eternal Guardian, they had re-illustrated him for this really cool first slide. And I was like, oh, that looks amazing. And I was telling Alex, I'm like, Alex, we got to make this an alternative art card. Like, holy Moses, this is so cool. Nice. So maybe you'll see an Eternal Guardian alternate art card because I have this amazing piece of art that was done.
Nice. It's funny. Tyler, who I believe is still the lead art designer over there.
He's our art director.
Art director, sorry. A difficult company lingo. He was in my stream a couple of times, and I really love a lot of the art that he's done. I actually was watching him as an artist before Cryptozoic existed. Well, not before Cryptozoic existed, but before Hex existed, which was kind of an interesting thing. Yeah, I was actually using a piece of his art as a background for a long time, which I guess you're probably going to hear the same question every single time that you're out in the open, but as somebody who loves the art of Hex, I'm going to ask it anyway because I can't let that chance escape me. Double Back's still on the back burner, so we still can't see artists for a while?
I wouldn't say it's the back burner. Tyler has redone the entire layout for the Double Back. So it's not on the back burner. It's in active development. It's still a little ways away. I don't think it'll be in the next batch of stuff. I think it'll probably be the batch after that. But I definitely want to get it out sooner than later, that's for sure. Again, it's just all about that prioritizing. One of the ideas I have that I would love to do, though, is actually make the artist name a clickable component. And so you'd be able to click it, and it would bring up a little pop-up bio of the artist with some examples of his hex art, his or her hex art, which I think would be really cool.
That was my tie-in, actually, is because
maybe a little picture of them, their name, like a little one-paragraph bio, and then maybe 3 or 4 images from the game that they've done. I think that'd be really neat.
Yeah, in other games, some artists will have a trademark thing that they put in everything, and so being able to click their name and look at some of the arts to see if they have that type of signature could be neat.
Yeah.
Or just the other art that they did.
Yeah, because that's the big...
I'm very art-centric. I mean, my original background, through in college was in marketing and graphic design, oddly. I'm very design and art centric, and so I'm very passionate about having the game look great and also giving back and supporting the artists as well.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to a crappy art school. I went to the Advertising Arts College of San Diego.
Okay. The reason why I asked is that both League of Legends and now Heroes of the Storm from Blizzard have done a couple different college events, kind of like a March Madness type thing where you get brackets and get different colleges who play against each other. And I wanted to kind of pitch, I guess, as a potential idea to spread Hex to the college age individuals who may not be Kickstarters, is that you can have team events like 3v3 from different colleges. As you're developing your organized plays, that might be another avenue to pursue.
Yeah.
In the Wild Cup, which we're having backed by the Dragonborn Guild, we're going to have a team event where it's 3 versus 3, and it's a collective or unified constructed format where you only can use 4 copies of any given card for all 3 decks.
Oh, that's neat. I like that.
Yeah,
it's something they want to do because they really want a team format, and we're looking forward to it. It's going to be a very interesting shift in the meta.
No, I think that's really neat. I like that a lot. That's a very clever idea.
There's a lot of excitement from the people we've talked to about that, because it also it limits. There are some very specific deck archetypes that people don't like seeing, and now it's going to limit people. Like, obviously, in a team of 3, you won't be able to see that every single time that you play.
They each get 1.33 Gorfies.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that without being specific. I mean, that was just a card that we pulled out of the air. That actually throws us towards PvE, since we've been talking about PvP so much. I think, especially since by the time people are listening to this, hopefully your clients are patching smoothly, and the arena is releasing. You asked for some hard questions, so earlier on there was some mention. It was probably like a little paragraph here or there, but I'm really good at finding little tiny Cory statements and holding on to them forever. A lot like print runs, which people told me you never said about, but I went and found it in the Kickstarter in a comment, dig deep down somewhere. Yeah. You definitely mentioned them, but people didn't believe me when I said that they existed until we had mathed out the print runs for set 1, which is a pretty exciting thing. Specifically, you stated that there was some arena development going on where certain cards would interact with each other in a way that wasn't necessarily ever... I'm trying to word this in a proper way as to what its context was. Basically, cards would create combos that didn't actually exist in the game. And my thought process when you said that was something like, if you played a Princess Victoria and then a Queen Grace, it might spawn something that just didn't. Neither of those cards say it happens, but because you're playing PvE, it does happen. Are there any of those kind of things still in the works, or did they not make it into the arena, or are they just kind of being held back for now?
They did not make it into the arena. That was about PvE, correct? It wasn't.
No, it was definitely about PvE. It was specific to.
That's actually more about the specific thematics inside of the dungeons, and so that is there are dungeons that are all the dungeons are very thematic. Mm-hmm. And so there are certain decks you can bring into certain dungeons where you may trigger some events because one race hates the other, or you're playing with a whole bunch of, a certain type of card. You're playing a bunch of wild cards that destroy artifacts, and you're in an artifact dungeon. So there's stuff built into the dungeon systems that are more along the lines of what I was talking about.
Okay.
Ben Stoll and I were just talking about today, we were building, I don't know, there's some little mini game-ish sort of thing we were working on, and we were talking about we could do X, Y, or Z, and we both had the recognition that the two of us love putting in hidden nonsense into games, and it's probably, it's probably Hex will have more hidden nonsense than any game out there because we're both in love with it, and he's the lead designer and I'm in charge of making the final decision on everything. And so there is tons of crazy little hidden things, but that specific component was more dungeon specific than it was about these two cards together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, I only brought up two cards to try to make sure my point was
so it's not so much the cards driving that interaction as it is the cards driving that interaction in conjunction to whatever dungeon you're in.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I was always I think the point I made, I would have to go back and listen to the podcast, but that would force me to listen to my own voice for a little while, and that's not going to happen. Is I was thinking that in the arena you would be playing certain cards that triggered whatever Hogarth doesn't like, maybe that card can't be here or whatever. I don't remember what my specific point was, but that's what I gathered out of that, and that's what obviously it doesn't exactly tie into the arena, but I like the idea of that being in the dungeon. So I hope that there's hundreds of tiny little small things like that to find, because that is incredibly exciting.
It's one of the fun, the things that we want to do are make sure that the dungeon experiences. That's why we're building lots of interesting things going on that's not just standard TCG play, so that you have a varied and fun experience and it doesn't become a little bit boring that you're just playing a TCG over and over again, although I love playing a TCG over and over again, so I got no problem with that. Mm-hmm. But we're trying to vary the experience by having lots of stuff going on. I mean, we tried to do some of that in the arena. I mean, you'll see that all the different arena guys you fight have some interesting charge powers or interesting passive powers. You'll occasionally get the MC challenges,
which are very fun.
Yeah, it just mixes stuff up. And when you're playing with one deck, trying to overcome all those challenges with one deck becomes, difficult. I mean, I've played the arena a lot, and I lose to Zoltog way more than I beat Zoltog.
Zoltog's pretty insane.
He's super insane.
Once he starts going, So, Arena's technically out by the time you release this. When you were streaming this for the Arena the other day, I say this the other day, this is like a week or several weeks ago at this point. There was you were pretty sad that a lot of stuff was being revealed in the client, and I think people actually got to see more secret bosses than you even expected out of what you were looking at, because there was a boss who clearly didn't have all their cards implemented that people ran into, that awarded a lot of gold. Which
that was what I was sad about. I was more sad that some of the bosses we were seeing weren't working. There are secret. I don't know. I guess they're secret. I don't know if they're secret. I mean, everyone's played against the Princess Cory deck. That's just a standard boss.
Little low level secret, yeah.
There's one secret boss that appears very, very, very rarely.
Yeah, and people did run into him. Despite
They did.
I'm pretty sure if we're talking about the same one that awards a dragon load of gold, then that would be the one. There might be another one beyond that.
So Urnaz?
What? Yeah. No. Yes.
All right. So people have seen that, but
very, very rarely, though. Of all the people playing the arena, I believe myself and one other person have actually talked about running into it, and I think I haven't actually heard of more than that. So there might be people. But
did you beat him?
I destroyed him. His cards weren't working. By the time I got to it, it wasn't even. He rolled over, and I pet him on the underside, and. It was obviously not intended.
His cards are working. Winning that fight is very, very difficult.
Which is awesome. But it actually kind of rolls around to two-part question. First of all, did any other secrets get developed between then and now that, maybe to cover up the fact that we got to see some secrets then? And we realized that asking for more at this point isn't exactly kosher, but how much more content can the arena expect? Because at some point it was mentioned that it would get more content consistently, but then a little bit later on it was mentioned that this was just to tide us over until not to tide us over, that's poor wording, but you understand my meaning. So is more going into the arena down the road?
Yes.
Or like more bosses? Okay, that's awesome.
More content's going into the arena. There were no additional secrets were put in. That's one of the, and again, I've talked about in the past, one of the downside of doing alpha, the downside of doing the sneaks is that you get to see all the stuff, and often you're seeing it poorly implemented. As an example, Urnaz is not just destroying you. That's not how that's supposed to work. And so, you pay a price. People have seen the secret stuff. The fun part will be, if you beat Urnaz, you get a set of sleeves. So that's, I think pretty cool.
Also, you sometimes get those sleeves for not beating Urnaz on the test server currently, which is...
All right.
Some people have just randomly been awarded the sleeves, which also...
Yeah, that's also not how it's going to be. So if you've got the Urnaz sleeves, you'll have earned them on the live server, and that will be a badge of honor because beating Urnaz is going to be incredibly difficult. I do not think... One, he spawns very rarely, and two, if you beat him... congratulations, because that is not easy.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning because I don't think I've really talked about it. I encountered Urnaz on my own at some point. I didn't really want to talk about it a whole lot on if I had been streaming, it would have been cool, I guess. But I played the arena pretty much since the test server has been out and every hour that it's been available. I have been playing a lot of PvE. I'm very excited about it. So, sadly, earlier we confirmed that chests won't be openable. Do you have a hard number of pieces of equipment that are coming in with this patch?
God, I don't want to say a specific number because I know I'm going to be wrong.
Over 200, less than 300? That's what we've heard.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Are there any pieces of equipment... Are there some chase pieces of equipment? Are there rarity based on...
Oh, yeah. There's all the levels of rarity, from common to legendary.
Okay.
So for sure, and the bosses later in the arena, the level of rarity drops from the bosses are determined by when you encounter them.
Okay.
So the end boss and the one before him, they are the ones that may drop rare or legendaries. So there is a complete loot table based on levels of rarity for the equipment, and it's keyed into how far into the arena you get.
Okay, and this is something people wanted to know, or specifically I wanted to know a bit about. Because you can skip tier 1, is there going to be a... Without spoiling too much, because obviously we're asking you for a bunch of equipment, but we don't want super specific stuff. Is there pieces of equipment that people will have to farm specifically off the Eternal Guardian, let's say, or whatever tier 1 boss? Or is skipping tier 1 when it's available to you as an option going to be generally the better option?
It is the better option.
Okay. And another hard question because it's on my mind. I'm just rifling these off because they're things we didn't have written down, but they are a two-part question. First of all, Is gold being removed from tournaments on Tuesday?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. That is amazing. And secondly, now that gold is being removed from tournaments, one of the biggest things that happens is, of course, going to be the inflation when players start beginning to grind for gold, because that's just not... It's... People are going to be able to farm it. Is there... Mike wanted to say something, but I'll just finish this question. Are there any planned sinks for gold?
Yes, 100%. I mean, the greatest sink of all, although you can't open the chest yet, are the Wheels of Fate. That's a huge sink for gold. And I think once you are able to open chests, and once you see how cool the stuff in chests are, and how the rarity levels of the chest really do determine what's in it, or has a big impact on what's in it, I think that becomes a very powerful sink. And we've also put some great stuff on the wheels themselves in terms of prizes. Outside of that, that's the big one for now, although we do have a plan for a sort of one-off gold sink that we're going to do that will be coming in at some point in the very near future that will be very, very cool.
Before opening chests?
Before opening chests, correct. Before opening chests? Yes, I believe it is before opening chests. There's going to be one other thing we're going to offer that's a really fun gold sink. But the chests are the big ones. And I think that, grinding for gold will be a real thing. But, the other thing, too, is that the auction house exists and you can spend gold there. That was kind of the point, was that we wanted the free-to-play player to have a way to generate enough gold to be able to go get some of the commons and uncommons that are staples for decks, so that you can sort of juice up the deck that you got for free, and you'll be able to sort of do a little better in the arena. That was sort of the plan.
Well, in the short term, you're going to have a population glut of people who are free-to-play and non-free-to-play, and if the rolling the chests are in there, the price of cards, the price of packs are just going to go up, and may potentially price out some of the free-to-play players.
Yeah.
Which might be a reason why sinks are pretty important, so
yeah.
PvP players are buying up gold by trading their cards for them, or trading their packs for them.
Correct. And so that's why we have another set of gold sinks that we're going to put in the not too distant future that I think will also help with that. But managing that economy is something we've actually spent a lot of time on, in terms of how much gold exists, how long it takes, like what is the hourly rate for gold creation, what we hope the different price levels are. Alex does a pretty, Alex and Cory, not me, another Cory, do a pretty good job mathing all that out and modeling all that. So it's all very specific. I mean, we're not really shooting in the dark. We've come up with models, and we sort of manage to them. And so far, it's been pretty spot on. But I think that some of the stuff that we have planned will help pull some of the gold out of the economy.
Okay, so this is a art relay question. People on the forums and elsewhere are being intrigued by this story progression of art where it includes you, your wife, and Holiday doing things, fighting each other. Is there a hidden story behind those pieces? And is that something that we have to discover, or did you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I just got all my vanity cards out at one time in a big glut. I felt like, we have lots of people in the game, and we, vanity cards for our Kickstarter backers, and then the guys asked if they could. They said, "Hey, we should make Princess Cory into one of the bosses for the arena," and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And I thought, "Oh, that would actually be a good chance for me to put my family in, because my long suffering family, it's the last 5 years of starting Cryptozoic and doing all this have been at a cost, and the cost has been largely shouldered by my family not seeing me. And so I just thought it was, a good place for me to say a little bit of a thank you and put them in the game. And so the Valerie's thing, I messed up the damn flavor text on hers. The whole thing was a joke, and then I didn't pay the darn joke off with the flavor text. So I got to change it again back to what it was supposed to be, which it was supposed to say more fairies in Sector 5, because when I used to play WoW in raids, up in the loft area in our house, I'd have headphones on and I'd be yelling during the raid, and she would walk by, and that was the joke she would make. Hey, more fairies in Sector 5. She's a pretty hardcore gamer, but it's mainly Plants vs. Zombies on the tablet. And so she would make fun of me for yelling about, like, when I'm doing a molten core raid or whatever. So that became a running joke. And so I put her in, and she was going to be, her flavor text was going to be more fairies in Sector 5. And then she creates those two fairies. And they were supposed to both say, we're here to protect Sector 5. And then I completely spaced it and put in that other flavor text. I don't know what I was thinking. I did it super late at night because I had to go off for translation. So I got to fix that.
Did you play a druid, or were your druids not casting fairy fire?
No. It wasn't anything to do with the game at all. It was just the random joke she was making. I played a warlock, and so.
Oh, you're one of those guys.
Yes, and my friend and I played endless arena, like a affliction warlock, and he was a shadow priest. And but it first came out, and it was so much fun. I loved it deeply. And so, but then the holiday stuff, like I told them, like I came up with the cards, the special cards in there. I came up with those, and I wanted them all to be very random and weird and fun, and just make the encounter just seem completely zany. And so that's when the idea was that my wife was a fairy and I was a human, and then Holiday's sort of half fairy. She has wings and a dragon tail, but then like I tried to key it into like imagination because I dreamed up Hex, and then have her be this sort of part me and be able to change into things. And so that's what the basic story of it was, but there's no larger story. It was sort of a self-encapsulated thing.
Okay. Penta, were you going to ask that question that your curse was on, or?
No, I sorry, I backed off because I stole like 1,000 questions just a second ago. I had my mouse somewhere random.
Okay. I mean, we might as well ask. It's kind of a future thing. When the next PvE dungeon comes out, will the first one still be the Kraken dungeon?
It's one of the first ones. The dungeons are not going to release one at a time. They're going to come out in batches. And,
that's awesome.
And Ben has just been on fire. Ben has taken on a bunch of the PvE stuff lately. Ben is really like a... I'm so happy to have such a talented team, and Ben has really been working overtime and really knocking it out of the park to come up with some really great stuff. He's a big talent, and we've really gone back. I mean, we've gone back to scratch on PvE so many times at this point. I mean, this is the challenge when you're building something new from scratch, something that's never been done before. You have to. Good game design is about one thing and one thing only: iteration. And so taking the time to go back and say, listen, yes, we built a system. Yes, it's reasonably fun, but it isn't doing exactly what we want, or we feel like we could do a better job. Then you have to be able to scrap it and try again. And so we have scrapped the systems for PvE and how the zones work and how you move around the zones and how you do encounters so many times at this point. And a while ago, we went back to scratch again, and I feel like where we are now, we're in the execution phase now, where we've made a bunch of decisions. We've Tyler has mapped everything out. We got our plan in place. We've been executing for a while. Arena system is now in, which is a lot of the backbone for a lot of the other PvE content. I feel like where we're heading is pretty different than what we've talked about in the past, but. It is so good. I think people are really going to go crazy.
So Arena is providing a chunk of the infrastructure necessary to produce multiple dungeons at once?
The back end, yes. The MC challenges, the AI, the reward system. I mean, we don't really build content, we build tools, and the tools are used to make content. And so we're getting some of the tools finished, which then allow us to use the tools to make content like the dungeons. But the dungeons require a bunch of stuff, including the globe to work, and then the next zone down where you see the map that's between where you go into different dungeons and or panoramas for the cities. And that's the kind of stuff that we've been spending a lot of time over the last several months, 6 months, or more, really fleshing it all out and locking down the systems. And I think we're finally to a place now where it's pretty remarkable. I think when people are eventually get a chance to experience it, it's really neat. We have this whole nodes system, and I think the adventure and the RPG component of this has really been amped up. And we've got some Phil came up with an amazing system as part of the leveling. We've just come up with so much good stuff, and it really only could have happened by playing through a lot of systems and letting them resonate, and then going back and iterating on them and iterating, and then eventually figuring out you had to scrap big chunks of it and take what's good and then marrying it to a new system. So we've gone through that so much. I think we've finally gotten to our destination, and like even that last, the last system that we talked about in terms of how you level specifically in the dungeon, and that's all been scrapped. We've got a whole new system in place.
Oh wow! Oh, do you have like a teaser for how the new system works? Actually, somebody did ask this on Reddit, and we chose not to write this question in. But now that you've mentioned that, is there more solid overall account-based progression at this point?
Yeah, for sure,
and more so even than that in-dungeon suggestion. Oh,
yes,
awesome!
100%. There is a we've walked down the path so many times now. We've we changed the keep name to Stronghold. So your Stronghold and the buildings in there, and then what you level up and the choices you make. And I mean, right now, I just got 30 minutes ago an email from Tyler with a giant mock-up of all the interface screens for the crafting system. Nice. It looks amazing.
You can forward that to me anytime.
Yes, it's just amazing. And so, yes, there is the account leveling, but actually we've gone back to making the leveling of your individual champion much more robust.
Nice.
We always were struggling with this idea of, do you make it easy for people to jump around and experience lots of different types of builds, or do you lock it way more down like an RPG where you're leveling up one guy and then unlock stuff? And, having looked at both sides of it, I think we've turned the dial back over to being a little more RPG, frankly.
Nice.
So in terms of producing multiple dungeons, is kind of similar in producing a new set. 80 to 90% of the actual coding of that is going to be easy. It's going to be routine because you have the infrastructure to do so. Right. Another 10% may be a little bit harder. But when you have dungeons that do really weird, unique things like the Kraken taking cards from you and using it later in the match, that's going to be the stuff that really slows you down. But do you think you have a flexible enough infrastructure that you can put out multiple dungeons at once?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think 100%. And we have it's not even a small number. I think the first batch of dungeons is pretty big. It's like, I believe, a dozen or more.
Whoa. And
again, I don't want to be kicking anyone in the stomach.
No. You're not kicking anyone in the stomach, but like...
Don't punish me later for this, but I believe...
it was only 11.
Yeah, I believe it's a pretty significant chunk of content. I mean, like I said before, we have 50 designs, so...
Yeah.
And including art. Like, we booked... for the last year, or 2 years, we outlined the dungeons a long time ago, came up with all the art descriptions, the basic design of them, so we know everything we need. I hired hundreds of artists, spent a lot of money on art for them all. All the maps, like all those dungeons have a giant detailed dungeon maps done. Like, they're all finished. And so we have them all. We've play tested a lot of them endlessly. They've all been play tested. But now it's just a matter of making them. So having the tools to make them was the gating issue. And so we will be putting out batches of them, basically. The dungeons are going to be incredible. But the Kraken one, the stuff you mentioned actually isn't where the big challenges come from. Some of the other dungeons where we try to really change up the game, like squirrels versus dinosaurs, that one's very expensive from an engineering standpoint. And so that will not be one of the first ones that comes out, because it would have to be at the expense of everything else, basically. But it's still coming. I think that the team they must have spent 50 plus hours individually, hundreds of hours as a group on that squirrels versus dinosaurs dungeon. Holy Moses, they spent so much time on that, and it is amazing. But yeah, it's very expensive from an engineering standpoint. The other piece that you were asking about dungeons. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
I hardly remember what it was. We were asking, Yeah, I honestly, it couldn't have been that important.
The Kraken's gold. It was not expensive. The thing that becomes expensive for the dungeons is that for all of the dungeon maps, for all of the interface components, the goal is to make them as rich and flavorful as possible. And so it becomes a pretty big burden to the art group. And the art group isn't huge. And I want them touching everything, because you'll notice, like, you'll notice on the arena, we have a new board. And our lead, VFX artist, I mean, he goes in and does that amazing stuff to make the snow mounds, and you notice like a little bit of snow filtering across the screen, and I mean, there's just so many cool things that are going on, and I want all of that for everything we do. But that level of polish, again, very expensive.
Yeah,
and that's why, like, you notice we have job postings up. I want to hire more, Unity VFX artists, because I want to have the chance to put that polish on everything to make it all look great. Well, one of the things that you'll be finding out as you download the new arena stuff that we didn't put in for the alpha, or for the test server. 3 original tracks.
Nice.
Yeah.
So there's no music for the arena.
Yep. Three songs by Mr. Shapiro, the gentleman who's done all the music for Hex. Nice. 3 very cool pieces of music.
Okay, you just mentioned the playmat that's in the arena. Is there any chance that we will be able to unlock a way to swap that over to our current playmat? Be able to use it in PvP?
No, my big thing right now.
No, Cory.
I've talked to the guys, and my goal, what I really want is for those other. We got a bunch of plans for that. It's very specific to the dungeons and the arenas, and there's going to be actual gameplay stuff associated with some of that as well. So it's not going to be the maps. The game boards are actually not going to be a cosmetic component from the game, even though it is technically cosmetic. It's going to be something that we use to help you feel immersed in the dungeon experiences. So I want those to be where they live, because I think it sort of, not devalues them, but makes you a little more, a little less excited about them when you encounter them in the dungeons, because you've seen them in the other places. But the thing I want to do, I want to make I've talked about this in the past, I think, but I want to make the plinth, the little floating disc that your deck is sitting on, I want to make that customizable. And that's going to be one of the other collectibles in the game.
Nice.
But again, that's one of those things that's a little far off. So the light source, like it'll produce light from beneath. But then it could be, you imagine one with vines growing around it with like this radiating little bit of green light coming from out of it, like a nature one, or one that's on fire. So I think that the splint is one of the things that you're going to have that's going to be customizable. But I think the game boards are going to be dictated by where you're playing.
Awesome.
Okay.
So even though I'm sure we both had a ton of more questions to ask, and Mike was about to step in, and I once again railroaded him, you were going to talk about what we usually do on the stream, right, Mike?
Yeah, so, I mean, we've kept you for now for 2 hours and 15 minutes of actual podcast time, which is way longer or not way longer. It's going to be one of our longest episodes ever, which is fantastic, so thank you so far. The one thing that we do on every episode is we crack open and pack and we discuss our picks, and so I posted in Skype chat what we currently are looking at. Do you have the text there?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right here.
Okay, so I'm just going to read over it so the people who are listening know what we're looking at. We have for our rare a Teapot Prosperity. The uncommons are Underfoot Commander, Mentor of the Song, and Lumbering Sparklespore. And the commons are Mesmeric, Hypnoscientist, Immortal Tears, Manti Ranger, Verdict of the Ancient Kings, Rotting Buffalo, Adrenaline Rush, Darkspire Punisher, Charge Hulk, Crackling Wit, Feeding the Young Ones, and Prophet of Wren. We'll ask you, just because we're going a little bit long, to pick first your first pick and then also your second pick, assuming that your first pick was no longer in the pack and was passed to you like this. And tell us why.
My first pick, the Teapot in draft is actually not terrible, because your deck is so much smaller that it can actually make a difference. But it's just slow. So I would not take the rare in this case. My instinct would be to take the Mentor of the Song, I love that card. I'm looking at the rest of it. Manti Ranger I love, but it's just a huge commitment. Mesmeric Hypnoscientist also good, but not one that I play a lot. Typically, Underfoot Commander, not really going to take that. Lumbering Sparklespore I love also, but a 7-drop, I mean, I feel like that'll table if I really want it. The rest, I mean, Adrenaline Rush, yes, that's removal basically. Charge Hulk is insane, but at this point you're making decisions about what you want to, because this is how I draft typically. I typically force drafts, so I'll make a decision based on this first pack, and then I'll just sort of all in it and try and make it happen, which is a goofy way to draft, but
you've been able to get away with it based on some of your Twitter pics you used to post.
Yeah, we've seen some crazy drafts.
Yeah. I also, I don't really play to win. I'm kind of just playing to have fun because, I like to let the other person win. So I would probably go Mentor of the Song. I love that card. It's amazing. I often draft just anything with card draw, try and make the deck that goes through cards as quickly as possible. Probably my second pick would be Charge Hulk because it leaves me open. There's just no reality where Charge Hulk isn't just playable. So the other one, Feeding the Young Ones, maybe. I mean, I love that card, and if I was just going to try and go all in and try and play, the Shin Hair deck, but it'd be a hard one. Mentor the Song is a no-brainer for me. The next one is between the Charge Hulk, the Feed the Young Ones, and the Adrenaline Rush, and I would probably go with Charge Hulk just because it left me open to see if my second pack had the rare float, or if there was something in it that was more build around that got me excited, or was, that's it.
Sure. Penta, do you want some picks? You should make some picks. I don't know why you wouldn't.
Well, no, I mean, it would just be the first time that I randomly decided not to. Okay, so the Teapot of Prosperity does suffer from just... if it's not in your opening hand, you're, never happy with it, because even though if it's in your opening hand, it opens up a whole lot of options, there's a couple of other things about the card that really slink away from it, and it devalues your shards to some extent, because even though you're getting your... if you reduce the cost of everything in your deck, you don't need to have 17, 18 shards in your deck, so then you start to feel bad when you're picking them. Underfoot Commander, I feel is one of those cards that's a little bit undervalued, because if you get 2 or 3 of him, you can start tunneling a bunch of troops and make them really big. Mentor of the Song, even though I do agree with Cory on the terms of it being fairly decent, is... just because it's a 2-1 for 3, even though it turns into an Oracle Song, it's not... It doesn't provide any board presence, and it actually wheels uncommonly large amount of times. So, yeah, way more than I think it should. I agree with you that I think it's a very good card. I think a lot of people see a 2-1 body, they get a little bit afraid of it, and then you're making a commitment to pay 3 for an Oracle Song. So let's say you get it on turn 3, and then your opponent kills it, or you use it to block. Even if you trade successfully with it, you then get an Oracle Song, which you then use. Let's say you get a 4th shard on turn 4. You play 4, you use Oracle Song, you draw 2, and now you have 1 resource left. So you're kind of in a bind where the same Oracle Song bind as always is you need a reason to have card advantage before you start forcing card advantage.
People are so afraid of you drawing cards. Yeah. I drop them on the board. They'll have board presence and won't attack because they're afraid the Mentor of the Song is going to die, and then I'll be able to draw some cards. People are trained not to give you card advantage, and so they don't know how to play around Mentor of the Song very well, and I noticed that they make bad decisions. Also, in 40 card decks, card draw is really strong. I mean, it's just exponentially powerful.
Yeah, I agree. I think... Wow, I opened this pack and I had so much time to look at it. I think this is the pack I opened. This is the uncommons.
Yes.
Yeah.
I changed.
You obviously changed. Our rare was too obvious. I think I like the Manti Ranger as a first pick here. I like the Manti Ranger as a first pick here because even though it is a heavy commitment, it does a lot of things that a other set of troops can't do. Wild got substantially more powerful with set 2 added to the draft, at least within the draft formats. It has Spell Shield, so it avoids the limited amount of removal that your opponents are able to deal with. And there's a champion that gives +2/+2 to a troop right now, Benoshi, who happens to fit into Blood Wild incredibly well. And having a 6/4 Crush with Spell Shield is like having an even bigger T-Hex at the low cost of whatever you happen to sacrifice off. If I get the Mentor of the Song back, I can go try Shard and I can start sacrificing my Mentors, but that's a pipe dream. But even feeding the young ones are great options because you play Manti on turn 4, and then on turn 5 you use feeding and sacrifice one of the Battle Hoppers. And feeding the young ones is considerably better than people give it credit for. Even if it only deals 2 damage and gives you 2 blockers, you're dealing 2 damage and getting 2 blockers.
No, it's huge.
Yeah.
Benoshi, too, is I think, way under... I mean, I've noticed people are... It's coming to people's attention that Benoshi is incredibly strong.
I think, and maybe Mike noticed this too, I think there was like a moment where about 2 or 3 weeks into the drafting process, people caught on to, oh wait, a 3/3 giant mosquito will win a game in this format.
Or a tormented ritualist.
Or if you happen to get lucky and get there's so many good blood troops with Benoshi that you can just force such a low cost deck and go for it. I like, for my second and third pick, without eating up too much more time, I like Underfoot Commander, and I know it's an unpopular and weird pick, but I actually really like Prophet of Wren as a third pick.
It's not unpopular, but it's not usually a high pick.
No, I probably don't have to worry about it disappearing here. And like I said, I wasn't going to go too much into it, but it's one of few diamond cards in this pack. So if I'm already on my third pick, I can be really happy. When I say it's one of few diamond cards, I'm looking back here. It is the only diamond card. I can take it, and I can be reasonably happy with it coming back. And it gains you health, which is something you usually want when you're playing any of my favorite archetypes. And a 3/3 body is always good.
So for me, my first pick is a Charge Hulk here. It's good in every single deck you play in draft, and allows you to float to see what's coming back to you. Unfortunately, this is still kind of early in the drafting environment, even though we've had this since December, that the vast majority of my first pack second picks exclude a rare, because I think people are still rare drafting, so I don't get good information by doing this most of the time, but if I'm in a competitive draft, it usually will allow me to make a better, more informed choice when people are not picking the rare. And Charge Hulk is just great. But also, one of my favorite archetypes has always been dwarves, and so my second pick would be the Mesmeric Hypnoscientist, because getting 2, 3, or 4 of those is devastating for an opponent. And this allows me to move into dwarves. There's not anything else really in here that says dwarves are open, so I'm pretty happy about that as well. And I didn't pick a third thing here, so I put down Cory for feeding the young ones, since that seemed to be your third preferable choice.
Which is why I forced a third pick, yeah.
I think Teapot of Prosperity, actually, so I've tried Teapot of Prosperity twice now. It's been miserable every single time. But the deck I want to play in is Mono Wild, and if I pick Teapot Prosperity, there's a good chance I'm getting the Sparklespore here or in another pack, and so I'm pretty happy with that, though I'm probably just going to not have a good draft and not learn from my mistake yet. But I still want to try to make it work in draft, because it's acceleration, but it's not the same thing as a Howling Brave or Chlorophylla, but it's still a type of acceleration. So I want to make that card work. That's a rare, so I'll get that many options to do so.
Yeah, no, it's one of those ones that you're always just like, I really want to make it work. Honorable mention, because I don't think any of us talked about it. There's a Darkspire Punisher in this pack, which, as far as the cards here go, the Darkspire archetype is fine. Darkspire Punisher, as long as you have 1 or 2 other Darkspire cards, is really awesome, and card advantage is always great. And so if you make your opponent discard a card, especially a card at random, every now and then you see your opponent toss away their bomb, and you're just like, hee hee hee.
Yeah. Also works well with Benoshi.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. Notably.
Yeah. The Teapot. Yeah, it can be absolutely fun. Also sometimes with an Inspire deck, it can work out and do some good. The other one you mentioned, the The Hypnoscientist. Yeah, you know what? You make a good point. That often it's very undervalued, and you can run a draft and get 3 or 4 of them. And when you get 3 or 4 of them, being able to sort of just push through with a nice quick deck, absolutely can win.
Well, dwarves are so fast in this format.
Yeah.
They're way faster than 1/1/1 draft, and
Which is
they
weird.
kind of fit nicely.
And you can throw some of the socketed guys in, but they can only be blocked by the same color. Which can also, in the last pack, maybe grab a couple of the orcs. So making that sort of that ruby, mildly unblockable deck, and with these guys are really good.
It's actually one of the few cards that I like playing with Boulder Toss. I think Boulder Toss is crazy in that it is able to target an opponent's face, but I also think that people overvalue it because you very rarely have troops that make it valuable as a true removal. So it's usually just like a pseudo burn to the ground as a way to finish off your opponent. But when you have Mesmeric Hypnoscientist, there's not a whole lot of stuff in the game with 6 defense.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I won my draft. I think last night was the draft I played. And it was mostly because 2 Bowler Tosses and a couple Hypnoscientists led to very good things.
Yeah, nice.
In the draft.
I think I was watching that.
I don't think you were, unless you know something I don't.
Okay, it wasn't the one I was thinking about then.
Yeah, so this basically wraps up our episode. Cory, do you have any last parting words before we conclude?
I like to finish everything by thanking all the Kickstarter backers. I know that many of the people who listen to this podcast were Kickstarter backers, and I'm eternally grateful for everyone's support. And I hope that if you're listening to this, you're probably either downloading or have downloaded the arena. And I hope everyone has a good time playing it. It's really gratifying to see the first bits and pieces of the larger plan coming into place, and having equipment in particular is extremely gratifying. I mean, there have been many games where you could play AI opponents and all the stuff that the arena does, but there hasn't been a TCG that allowed you to have this sort of equipment component built into it. I mean, we had the gems and we had the socketing, which was very unique and very new and very cool. But this is just another piece of that sort of innovation component in the game, the thing that makes me most excited and the thing that I'm most passionate about. So I'm very happy that people are going to have a chance to finally experience some of this. So I hope you have a good time, and I hope it lives up to sort of what we've talked about and all the excitement we've sort of been pushing.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Penta, final words?
Honestly, at this point, after 2 years of playing in Hex and a relatively short amount of time compared to you and Elysian on the podcast, just being a member of the community, I have to say, in case it wasn't vastly apparent just in my manner of speaking and the excitement that I brought forward, it was really, really awesome having you here, Cory. This is my first chance to get to speak to you personally, and
Mine as well.
Thank you so much for coming on. A long time ago, 25 episodes ago, I sent you a message on LinkedIn, actually, which probably never got to you.
I you know what? I don't use, I created a LinkedIn years ago, and then I had a bunch of people on there, and stopped using LinkedIn.
It was a really weird situation. I figured it never got to you because I'm sure you would have at least said, no, I can't make it. But it was the 25th episode of this podcast. And I was just, I was actually in a situation, I think you were busy. Well, actually, you weren't busy at all, Mike. Your wife was very busy at the time, and you had to take some time off of the podcast. And I thought, the 25th episode, that's pretty exciting. Let's get Cory on. But I couldn't. I could get you on Facebook technically, and I could have hunted you down somewhere, but I didn't want to be rude about it. So I was like, I guess LinkedIn is professional. But
no, LinkedIn was terrible because I don't go there. I forgot to say congratulations on your 50th episode.
Thank you very much. So to have you here was really awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, no, you know what? It's my pleasure. And again, also you can reach me in the private messages in the forums. I answer all of the private messages I get in the forum, which is not an insignificant number. But I loved it. People ask, you get tired of talking about Hex? You talk about it so much, and your focus totally. And I have to tell people, like, no, I don't ever get tired of it. I love it so much, and it means so much to me that anyone who wants to talk about it with me, I feel almost guilty. Like, they must be sick of hearing me talk about this. So the opportunity to come on is actually my pleasure completely. And if you ever again want me to come on, just let me know. I love having the chance to talk about the game.
Did you ever change your phone number after the Kickstarter?
That was a separate burner phone that I bought.
Yeah, that I thought so.
Yeah, I took I'm gonna guess over 300 calls.
That's actually lower than I thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would turn it off at like 10, and then I turn it back on in the morning. But I took, I don't know, like it was over 300. I know that. It might have been 4. I don't know. But it was funny. Like I would not. I would talk with people as long as they wanted. I wouldn't try and get off the phone particularly. And I've told this story many times, but like I had one guy call at 10:30 at night, and I just happened to be sitting at my desk. I'm like, so I answer it. And he's like, I love Hex, and I love what you're doing, and thank you so much. And you know what else I love? I love Ultima 6. And he proceeded to talk to me for an hour and 15 minutes about Ultima 6. And I sat there and talked about Ultima 6 with him, and then eventually he got kind of mad. He's like, well, I gotta go. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to keep you on the phone till midnight talking about Ultima 6. But it's a big piece of what we do here, and I tell all the guys when we're at conventions or we have people here, it's a blessing, and it's an opportunity for us to talk to people who love what we're doing as much as we do. And so we always take the time to talk with people and spend time with people. And when it came to either taking those phone calls or just chatting with people on the show floor at Gen Con, we take that as not only a blessing, but as a responsibility to foster the type of community we want, which is people who care and people who are nice and people who are genuine. And so that's what we do. So, this definitely falls in that category of the things that are blessings to us to have available. The worst case scenario would have been that no one gives a crap about Hex and no one wants to talk about Hex or play Hex. So the idea that somebody cares enough, that you guys care enough to do podcasts and much less have 50 of them, it's like a dream come true, honestly.
Well, I asked about the phone because I'm sure if people listening to the podcast are now going to start messaging you on the private messages on the forums, not thinking initially that you would have responded there. So prepare your inbox.
That's okay. I lots of people people are upset, people are happy, lots of people asking me to please buy Kickstarter tiers, lots of different things. But it's fine. I don't mind it at all. I like talking to people.
Well, thanks again, Cory.
Oh, my pleasure.
This concludes our 50th episode of Two Turns Ahead. I want to thank the following people for helping out on the show and helping the community as well. And the community has helped quite a bit in making the show as a whole. So in order, I want to thank the people who've been on the show one or multiple times. So Elysian has been on 42 episodes as a sound engineer, Nicholas Podrasky for 36 episodes, John Tada for 18, Jeremy Crowley for 13, and JJ, Justin Jedi, and Will Gabriel have been on for 10 episodes each, Infamous Neo for 9, Matt Miller for 8, Wordle and Crone for 3 episodes apiece, and Errant Squire, Cabal Papa, Future, and of course Cory Jones for an episode each. Of course, thank you all for listening and encouraging us to keep doing this. If you have any comments about this or future content, you know right where to contact us because we have multiple avenues available to you all. Thanks for listening.
And stay lucky.
Send him to Davy Jones' locker.